as opposition.
This House will now come to order. I am pleased to welcome you to this first round of the debating forum sponsored by Parks Canada. I say to you, welcome, bienvenue, and in the language of the garden, Kiad Milafacha. The topic before the House today, be it resolved that residential property cannot be expropriated for purposes of developing or expanding Canada's national parks. Representing the government are the Prime Minister, Sonia Budge, the second speaker, Angel McKinnon, and the third member of the government, Marianne McKinnon. Representing Her Majesty's loyal opposition are the first speaker, Mary Lynn McPhee, the second member of the opposition, Jim Rossiter, and the leader of the opposition, Greer Johnson. As mentioned, there will be no judges for this debate, so no winner as such will be declared. I, Mauric Graham, will act as your speaker. Each debater will have 5 minutes in which to deliver his or her remarks. The Prime Minister's time will be divided between a 3-minute opening speech and a 2-minute official rebuttal. 15 seconds grace will be allowed each speaker. Would the timekeeper, Valerie Holder, please explain the method of timing? Valerie.
Okay, debaters, as each of you speak, the time will go on, and when you have 4 minutes left, I will hold up one of these cards, which will say 4 minutes, and then 3 minutes, 2 minutes, and 1 minute. When your time is up, I will stand up, and you will then be allowed 15 seconds. The leader of the opposition and the Prime Minister will have a 2-minute rebuttal. I will hold up a 1-minute card, and I will stand at the end of that also, and you will have 15 seconds left.
Thank you, Valerie. Are there any questions for the timekeeper? If not, I will quickly review some of the rules of parliamentary debate. As Speaker, I will entertain points of order, points of personal privilege, and information. Heckling will also be permitted, although I remind the debaters not to interrupt another speaker thoughtlessly or excessively, because I feel that this will lower the level of debate. Are there any questions regarding the rules from any of the debaters? All set. I will now call on the Prime Minister to introduce the bill, to define its terms, and to outline the government case. And just before the Honourable Prime Minister begins, if you wish, you may use the podium, or if you feel more comfortable at the table, you may stay where you are. Okay? The Honourable Prime Minister.
Thank you and good afternoon, Madam Speaker, honourable judges, worthy opponents, and ladies and gentlemen. The bill under debate today is be it resolved that residential property cannot be expropriated for purposes of developing or expanding Canada's national parks. Residential refers to private homes or homelands. Property is defined as things that are owned, usually homes and land. Expropriate means to take from its owner. Purpose is the reason for something, and to develop means to bring it to existence or to expand. And expand means to enlarge by increasing the size and area. Canada's national parks are the areas set aside by the government to preserve the natural resources of Canada. Fully defined, the bill reads, be it resolved that private homes and homelands cannot be taken from their owners for reasons of building or enlarging Canada's parks. I'd like to begin my debate with a quote from the National Parks Act. The parks are hereby dedicated to the people of Canada for their benefits, education, and enjoyment. If this is so, why is it that so many people suffer when private property is taken away and converted into park lands. The government is supposedly democratic. Is it democratic to have parks enforced where they're not appreciated or needed? The government never seems to remember the people whose lives are destroyed by their actions. We, the citizens of Canada, are honest taxpayers and expect more from a parliamentary system of democracy. When parks claim private property, it's cruel to the owners, who have absolutely no say in the matter. I say this because if they protest, they can be arrested. The payments for property are petty according to its value. The land, which is now the English baseball park, and the house that was there, was sold in 1970 for a mere $7,000. And often, taking over a person's home and property can destroy their heritage or even their life. Who wants a park building on top of where your dear old great-grandfather was buried? Land and homes can hold very much sentimental value, and the effects of taking this land can be psychologically fatal. And as I previously mentioned, the sums are hardly enough to buy new homes and land. In English, the graveyard has no room to expand. It's surrounded totally by park property, and soon bodies will be buried on top of one another. It seems that the parks have no respect for the living or the dead. Let me repeat my opening. Parks are hereby dedicated to the people of Canada for their benefit, education, and enjoyment. Thank you.
I thank the Honourable Prime Minister for her remarks, and I now call on the first speaker of the opposition.
Madam Speaker, this resolution is totally absurd. It's an absolute resolution stating that our magnificent national parks are not allowed to expropriate lands for purposes which benefit the province and that area. Expropriation is such a nasty word, isn't it? When a person gets land expropriated, it makes them sound like they have some kind of like a disease, you know. But national parks are community service, and everybody knows that if there's a national park in your area, everybody benefits. When a person is asked to sell the land for a very reasonable amount and we become very stupid and refuse, then they become expropriated. So expropriation is a last resort. To have land expropriated, it must be shown to be significant. My honourable colleagues, the Honourable Jim Roster and the Leader of the Opposition, the Honourable Greer Johnson, will further elaborate on ideas that show significant needs. I said before you get a large compensation, you should expect to receive the above market value, large compensation for the trauma of moving. In the Expropriation Act it states, and I quote, "Where a family home is expropriated, the position of the owner in regards to compensation shall be such that he will be substantially in the same position after the expropriation as compared with his position before the expropriation." If you really want to make everyone somewhat happy, you might take these suggestions into consideration. We have divided Canada's national parks into 3 groups: all parks, developing parks, and special cases park. In all park, we decide must apply a minimum of 10 years in advance and can only expand a maximum of 10% of the land already in use. A developing park must apply a minimum of 2 years in advance and can only have the land that is justifiably needed. Now, a special case park must apply a minimum of 1 year in advance, and there is such a short time because, for example, in wildlife situations where animals are almost extinct, may become totally extinct before the 10 years or 2 years comes around. These are just examples or suggestions of what might or could be done. If you really sit down and think about this resolution and what the government is trying to do, like we did, you'll soon find out that national parks should be allowed to expropriate land. One of the main reasons for this is the educational value. The educational value is unbelievable at wildlife parks such as Banff in Alberta or the Pacific Rim in Alberta and British Columbia provide scientists an area to study and observe animals in their natural habitat. Or here at the Alexander Graham Bell Museum provides us with an account of the life of a famous inventor. The Fortress of Louisbourg provides us with a taste of life in the 17th century on the French site. These examples given are only a few of the many national parks throughout Canada, and in every single one of them something can be learned, whether it be history or nature. If you are so unhumane to agree with the government, think about all the animals you are protecting, jobs you are creating, and the knowledge of our life to our children. Thank you.
I thank the first speaker of the opposition, and I remind the opposition as well that since you did not contest the definitions or the plan as presented by the government in your opening speech, you cannot in your next two speeches either. I will now call on the second speaker of the government, and the second speaker has the duty of completely describing the plan for implementing this bill today.
Good afternoon, fellow competitors, Madam Speaker, ladies and gentlemen. The topic we are debating today is, be it resolved that residential property cannot be expropriated for purposes of developing or expanding Canada's national park. When the park takes over private property and charges people to enjoy the natural resources which are rightfully theirs, it is time for someone to put their foot down. This is a prime example of the cruel inhumanity of the park officials. A local example is Black Brook. You need an expensive car sticker to enjoy the resources. Some people cannot afford this sticker, which is $30 as of this year. There's an old saying that the best things in life are free, but $30 is a long way from free. Plans for park expansion includes the lands of Big Interval. The residents are of Scottish background. If their land was taken away from them now, it would be the second time in 200 years in which they've been forced off their property. In 1936, the park were imposed on the residents of Cape Breton. The park gave them a choice on whether or not the park should be established. The people objected, and so the parks were not established. Another factor in this debate is when the government takes people's private land, it can cause a feeling of hatred between the people and the park. This could cause the people to take out their anger on the tourists who come from afar to look at our beautiful park. I feel that another major factor in this debate is the fishermen of Neils Harbor. They used to cut material for lobster traps on property now taken over by the park. They were told that they would have the right to this traditional practice. This right has not been written down, and over the years it has been withdrawn. Now a fisherman has to go elsewhere to get these materials. This is difficult in Neils Harbor as they are surrounded by the park. If people are only as good as their word, this doesn't mean much for the honesty of park officials. The government once said that a few people can be sacrificed for the happiness of many. This does not really apply to us because taking away our property would mean that our lives and heritage would be ruined. It is my contention that when people are deprived of their land, they suffer both financially and psychologically. This was the case in 1938 when the park took over all the land where the golf course in Ingonish is today. There were families living on this property, which was mainly farmland. Did they ever stop to think that maybe that was the family's only means of support? You may think that the park protects wildlife. To a certain degree, this is true. But we as residents of Cape Breton Highlands are now being overrun by moose. Why is that? In my opinion, it's because the park can't control the animals. Another fact is that the woods are becoming much too thick and very fire hazardous. If the park won't allow people to cut their wood, they should at least thin the woods out themselves. Thank you.
Thank you for your remarks. I remind all speakers that in government debate, in parliamentary debate, you should not read excessively from your notes. I now call on the second speaker of the opposition.
Madam Speaker, perhaps the best thing that's coming out of this debate is that we're going to be on TV. I certainly hope they get my better side. If I were to say what I thought of this resolution, I'm afraid it would be censored on TV and wouldn't be allowed in this debate. The whole idea of not being able to expropriate a person from land is absolutely silly. What we as the opposition feel is that there is a problem with the law as it is right now, but this is no solution to it. We have come up with a solution ourselves. But first I'd like to read a few things that I found during my research. Informed estimates are that as many as 1 million species may be gone forever by the turn of the century. Equally, man has it within his power to ensure that species and ecosystems are maintained as part of the human habitat. A major means of accomplishing this is through the establishment of national parks. Now, I won't explain this just yet. All these quotations will tie into each other. By the end of the 20th century, some researchers believe over 500,000 species now alive may become extinct, gone. However, many can still be saved. if effective action is taken to halt the rapid deterioration of the natural environment. Now, this last quotation here is one that hit me the hardest. The rate at which species are in jeopardy of extinction throughout the world is accelerating. As a result, reserved public lands, like those in the national park system, are becoming increasingly important, and that's what it says right here, I quote, increasingly important areas for the protection and maintenance of the dwindling populations of listed species. What are all these quotations trying to tell us? They're trying to tell us man has the power to save an extinct species, to save a species that's been on this earth for a long time from completely going. And how do we have this power? National parks. And Your Honor, we're not going to go up to a place like the Wooga Booga worm. Let's save it. We feel that this is happening too much as it is, and therefore too many people are being expropriated. Instead, we have come up, or found through our research, a system, what I call the 11 laws. These 11 laws are 11 headlines, and I'll go into that. I'll explain that now. We feel that Parks Canada, in order to expand or create a park due to ecological reasons, they should first have to submit a full explanation and detailed submission. And they must tell us about all people involved and all species that will be saved. We will put this submission under all 11 headlines. And then we will weigh the pros and cons, debate whether this park should be created. And then, and only then, if we decide, yes, this would prove to be beneficial to all parties involved, or most parties involved, then we will have the power to expropriate a person. But only expropriate a person, as my colleague has once mentioned, as a last resort. Well, we will offer above market value for these homes and lands, plus compensation. I ask the government a question. Let's just say this resolution does get put into law. How many animals will have to die before the government realizes? How many of these animals will have to die because of a man's stubbornness to leave his home or leave his property? Before the government realizes, yes, we goofed. This resolution should not have been put forward. Your Honor, what I'm saying here, to sum up my speech short, animals can be saved by creating national parks, but they can also be killed if those parks are not created. And one way those parks cannot be created is because of man's stubbornness to leave his property. Thank you.
Thank you for your remarks. I now call on the third government speaker to complete the final speech in support of the government bill.
Madam Speaker, fellow opponents, be resolved that residential property cannot be expropriated for the purpose of developing or expanding Canada's national parks is the bill we hope to pass. I would like to quote a piece from the Martin's Annual Criminal Code of Canada. It is said in our Canadian Bill of Rights and the Recognition and Declaration of Rights and Freedoms that the right of the individual to life, liberty, security of the person, and enjoyment of property, and the right not to be deprived thereof except by due process of law. Therefore, those who live in the proximity of Canadian national parks do not have the same equality or the same security of those Canadians living further away from a national park. Do you realize that expropriation of private land is against our Canadian Bill of Rights? This means that it is our right as Canadians to have the freedom to enjoy our property and not to be always under the pressure of the threat of losing our private land to the national parks. The fact that private land has to be expropriated in itself means that the owner of the land is unwilling to sell or part with the land in question. Years ago, communities were destroyed, and park employees and tourists are now living and camping on the land so many were forced to move off of. As my teammates here have mentioned, this will and might have already affected the amount of tourists coming into the parks during vacation time. Already since 1980 to 1984, there has been an average reduce of 10,000 people coming into parks during vacation. One argument used by the parks is they need the land to preserve the heritage of our early pioneers. Yet, today, there is little left to show the occupation of the early pioneers and their descendants. Instead, we find camping grounds for the tourists and big, beautiful homes for park employees. Nowhere in the Dominion of Canada has it been more clearly demonstrated the degree of disrespect than in the Cape Breton Highlands National Park. Generations of hard toil and sweat to clear the land, build homes, farms, and even small communities was all once built by the park. They either burnt the homes to the ground or bulldozed them under. And their families had to settle elsewhere. As for jobs, the top 11 management jobs are given to outsiders. This guarantees a lack of understanding towards the local residents when they receive hard labor jobs. It has always been said that local residents are the hewers of wood and the drawers of water as far as the national parks are concerned. And they're trying to say is local people receive hard labor jobs when outsiders receive the top management jobs. I personally know of a lady whose family suffered to death because of expropriation. When the man trying to support a family of 8 children and his wife, this lady was one of those 8 children, gave up his life and soon died after the park expropriated his land. He had just finished building a new home and barns, and they took it. The park took it. Now you can see why expropriation of residential property is wrong for the purpose of developing or expanding parks. And I can strongly say now that victims of expropriation are like refugees of their own country. Thank you.
Thank you. The leader of the opposition will deliver the last speech opposing the bill. It is her responsibility to complete the attack on the government case and to defend and summarize the position of the opposition. No more than 3 minutes of this speech may be used for introducing new evidence or constructive arguments. Unless the leader of the opposition indicates at the outset then that she is beginning the address, then she is beginning the official rebuttal. The last 2 minutes of your speech then will constitute the official rebuttal, and it may contain no new evidence. The leader of the opposition.
Be it resolved that residential property cannot be expropriated for purposes of developing or expropriating Canada's national parks. This is a ridiculous resolution, ladies and gentlemen. The word expropriation indicates nasty sentiment, doesn't it? Parks Canada aren't a bunch of nasty guys. They're not ogres on a mad campaign to kick people off of their property. Indeed, before anybody is expropriated from their property, Parks Canada must prove that the land is valuable. It's an asset. They must turn it into a park. They have to have a lot of proof before they go ahead with something like this. The question here is whether or not people are really that unfairly treated. I mean, they must make Joe Farmer or whoever happens to be on the property as happy as possible with the situation. What would the point be of taking someone's land and making it into a park if no one liked the government enough to go to the park? What would the point be there, ladies and gentlemen? There wouldn't be a point. Parks Canada, in expropriating land for the development of national parks, are serving the greater good. They are developing buildings, sites like this, that countless people can enjoy. Which is better? You must look at it objectively. Which is better? Is it better to satisfy one stubborn landowner, or is it better to develop something beautiful like this museum that we, the public, can enjoy? Which is better, ladies and gentlemen? As my colleague, Madam McPhee, introduced, I was going to talk about the economy, the economic aspect of this. We can use Baddeck as a shining example. Baddeck is a dead little town in the winter. Summertime, population more than doubles. And why? It is because of this park. Somebody asks you where you're from, you say Baddeck, and they say, oh yeah, I know that. That's the Alexander Graham Bell Museum. We are known for this, ladies and gentlemen. It brings every year approximately 200,000 people to this town. 200,000 people that are sleeping in our motels and eating in our restaurants. 200,000 people that are improving or creating an economy, because this museum, whether you want to admit it or not, is what gives Baddeck an economy. It's a tourist town. This town provides us with that economy. If you took this museum away, we would be a drive-through. No one would stop here. Why should they? And I'm sure that it is the same for many little towns all over the place. Same sort of situation. Suppose that the bill that the government has proposed was passed years ago. Where would we be now? We wouldn't have this museum. They couldn't have gotten this land. Where would we be? We would have no economy. We wouldn't be what we are. How could the government say that such a thing is good? How could they try and pass a resolution? It's not. Anyway, the improvements that were made to this museum years ago, it wasn't as spectacular as it is now. Millions of dollars were spent to improve it. Say the government couldn't get the extra land for the parking space to get more people in here. What would the point have been in improving it if they couldn't get more people in here? Millions of dollars down the tubes. That's wrong, too.
I remind the speaker that you should introduce no more new evidence.
Certainly. All right. In context with the government speeches, they came to you with a weak emotional plea. Is emotion what your government should be depending on? No, it isn't. We, the members of the opposition, are thinking of only your best interests when we deliver our factual arguments. The speakers, I can't remember them in order what they said exactly. They said something to the effect that the parks are not needed. Not needed. It's not a life and death situation, no, but they certainly do serve a public good, don't they? Of course they do. Destroying lives. It's not like a nuclear explosion. We're not devastating anybody here. We're certainly not intending to. The owners have no say. Of course they have say. As both of my colleagues pointed out, the owners of the land are talked to. They have the opportunity to haggle about it. They can make their decision. They have a say. Old great-granddad, as one of the speakers pointed out, he's still there. He still, doesn't matter if there's a museum on top of him or not, but he's still there. You can still remember him as he was, right? Holmes, ladies and gentlemen, Holmes, the guy who died because he built the barn and the house and then had to leave. Holmes, believe it or not, they can be moved. That's what technology has done for us, right? Look, charges for national parks. Did you people have to pay a cover charge when you came in here? I didn't. I really don't think that was such a topic. No. The feeling of hatred.
The speaker will quickly conclude.
Certainly. The feeling of hatred exhibited towards the tourists. No one's up here stoning tourists in the summer. No, that's not the way it is. The ruination of lands and heritage. What ruination? Things like this, homes, properties, are well preserved by the government. National parks do not destroy a thing. Thank you very much.
I thank the Leader of the Opposition for her remarks, and I now call on the Honourable Prime Minister to complete the government's case by giving a 2-minute rebuttal. Honourable Prime Minister. Certainly.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The members of the opposition talk like we were against park expropriation altogether. Now, if you'll read the resolution, they'll read it. Be it resolved that residential property cannot be expropriated for purposes of developing or expanding Canada's national parks. This is residential property. And this is taking away property from people. Okay. If the government doesn't look out for the personal emotional aspects of the people, then they aren't very good. And the opposition speaks of inhumanity towards animals. I think it's inhumane to rob people from their lands that they dearly love. And look at the root word of inhumanity. It's humans. And you guys are talking so much about animals being extinct. I think you should worry about the people. The people are the superior beings on the earth, and they're the ones that we should be thinking about, and that we, the government, are thinking about. And parks do provide jobs, we agree. But actually, at the present time, there are approximately 40 people employed from Judique to English parks, and that's not very many jobs. And as was mentioned by my teammate, the jobs given to the local representatives are the low-paying labor jobs, and the management jobs given to the outsiders. And I do agree that parks provide recreation for the community. But now we have to pay for a $30 sticker for the pleasures that were traditionally ours for free. For example, swimming at the beaches or walking in the woods.
No new evidence, please rebut the decision.
And also, I'm not disagreeing with the fact that parks provide protection of the environment. However, my teammates and I feel that parks can be set up without disturbing the people and their private property. If they want to set up parks, we suggest that they use the Crown lands. Overall, if this bill is passed, it will be for the benefit of everyone. As it is stated in the National Parks Act, the parks are set up for the benefit of Canadians. Thank you.
I thank the Prime Minister for concluding this debate. On behalf of the House, I would like to thank the clerk for her assistance. I congratulate all debaters for their remarks, and I would note again that with one exception, these are all junior debaters, and I think that they have done an admirable job. I thank the members of the gallery who have been most attentive. And since this debate has concluded and there is no other business on the order, I now will call this House adjourned.
I call this debate to order. I am pleased to welcome you all to the second round of today's debating forum. The topic under debate today is be it resolved that the principal function of Parks Canada should be to attract tourists to Canada. Seated on my right are the affirmative debaters, namely their first speaker, Helen Tubritt, their second debater, Laurel Leverett, okay, and their third member, Lisa McCormick. To my left, and supporting the negative side, are its first speaker, Thomas Parsons, its second debater, Tony Shaw, and its third member, Neil Doyle. Our timekeeper is Bernie Wills, and I, James Skinner, am your moderator. Each debater will have 5 minutes in which to deliver his or her remarks. Time of the first affirmative speaker will be divided between a 3-minute constructive speech and a 2-minute rebuttal. Remaining debaters will speak only once, dividing their 5 minutes between construction and rebuttal. I will grant the debaters the right to speak by introducing them, and they may hold forth until either they sit down or I demand that they relinquish the floor, whichever comes first. Would the timekeeper please indicate what system will be used to indicate remaining speaking time to debaters?
Okay, I will simply indicate the amount of time remaining by holding up the sign with the appropriate number on it. And after the debater's time has expired, I will stand for 15 seconds and allow 15 seconds grace, after which I will sit down, and then the debater must sit down as well.
Excuse me, Mr. Speaker, is there a problem there?
Yes, there is. As it turns out, there are 4 minutes. There's a total 4-minute speech, 2 minutes constructive, and 2-minute rebuttal.
No.
Okay.
4 minutes to state the case. And then 2.
And then 2.
Yeah, 6 in total.
I apologize to the debaters and all watching.
Okay. Each member has 4 minutes constructive, okay? And then each member has 2 minutes.
Each member has 2 minutes.
You stand twice. That's simply put.
Okay, to review the rules briefly, I cannot entertain points of order or privilege. I'll be alert. Just one moment, please. Is this, or is this not, the academic style of script?
It is.
It is? Okay, thank you. Because I cannot entertain points of order or privilege, I will be alert to call debaters to order for any improper or unbecoming conduct or other breaches of the rules. And at the conclusion of the contest, I will give both sides an opportunity to point out any infraction of the rules by their opponents. Also, I encourage the judges to penalize any debaters for any remarks made, bad taste, or other violations of the rules. I'll allow heckling and asides as long as this privilege of indulging in these is not abused. Wit is welcome, especially if it is brief, pertinent, and infrequent, but the judges should not hesitate to penalize a debater for deliberately disrupting an opponent's speech or for lowering the level of debate to excessive thoughtless interruptions. Are there any questions regarding the rules? Call upon the first affirmative speaker to deliver a further constructive speech, including the definition of the terms in rebuttal.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The resolution before us today states, be it resolved that the principal function of Parks Canada should be to attract tourists to Canada. To define the terms, principal, most important. Function, use. Parks Canada includes national parks, national historic parks and sites, historic waterways, wild rivers and byways administered by the federal government. Attract, to draw to, tourists, people who travel for pleasure. Canada, the world's second largest country. Mr. Moderator, Parks Canada is charged with the responsibility of protecting and managing, for the benefit of all Canadians, those places representative of Canadian culture and heritage, so as to leave them unimpaired for future generations. That is the principal responsibility of Parks Canada. But we're not talking about responsibilities here. We're talking about how the principal function of Parks Canada should be to attract tourists to Canada. Why should this be so? Everyone is aware of the drastic unemployment rate in Canada. To date, 1.5 million persons are without jobs. What you may not be aware of is that one important industry, that is tourism, is presently the 5th highest income in Canada. In addition to this, 7% of all Canadians are employed by Parks Canada. So you see that the idea of tourism, of which Parks Canada is a very essential part, and the idea of employment versus unemployment are very closely related. However, tourism as an industry is not as great as it could be. According to Tom McMillan, the federal minister of tourism, the government will invest another $10 million for marketing. Tourism is worth $18 billion per year and 600,000 jobs. But the rate of tourism has not been growing as fast as it is in other countries. Therefore, it's correct to say that there is room for increased revenue as a means of perhaps decreasing unemployment. In Cape Breton alone in 1983, tourists spent over $138 million here, creating 4,100 permanent full-time jobs. Therefore, it's correct to assume, or at least to contemplate the idea that by increasing tourism, the amount of money brought in, that one stands a great deal to benefit in terms of increasing unemployment. Increasing employment versus in terms of decreasing unemployment. However, it's important that you go beyond Canadian boundaries in terms of bringing tourists into Canada. In 1982, over 12 million people visited Canada, foreign visitors. They spent over $2 billion here, which is up from $1.7 billion in 1978. So tourism is a growing industry, but we can do more. Canadians in 1982 spent $3 billion abroad. Now, we're not interested in restricting travel here, but we're interested in bringing more money into Canada. And in terms of bringing more money into Canada, we're not just increasing tourism, but we're looking at the spin-off effects of doing so. The multiplier effect. Tourism brings money in, and that in turn increases jobs elsewhere. A park employee gets paid, in turn goes out and spends his money, help creating jobs and bringing more money into other industries. But it's necessary to attract these tourists to Canada, and Parks Canada is an important part of tourism in Canada. Parks Canada should concentrate on drawing to Canada foreign tourists. In terms of what Canadians have to offer to other people, in terms of what Canada has to offer as a country, in terms of tourism, there are so many things Canada has. There are so many benefits that can be reaped by bringing more people into Canada. That's apparent that Parks Canada, as a part, should be concerned with bringing more people in.
For her remarks.
Thank you.
We shall now hear the constructive address of the first negative debater. The negative intends to dispute the affirmative definitions. This must be done so now.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. We, the negative, do indeed intend to contest the affirmative definitions. Now, we agree with some of them, but in particular, the definition of function is in duty in a job. That's how we define the definition of function, and I think that's clear and obvious to all of us. that our duty in a job is a function. Now that we also intend to contest the term of Parks Canada as defined under the acts set out determining the purposes of Parks Canada. Parks Canada, we believe, is the federal government agency whose program objective is to protect for all times those places which are significant examples of Canada's natural and cultural heritage, and also to encourage public understanding, appreciation, and enjoyment of this heritage in ways which will leave it unimpaired for future generations.
Did you make that up on your own?
Now that we believe, now this definition, which has, as I previously stated, come from the mandate for the creation of Parks Canada. Now that we believe these are reasonable definitions, acceptable to all, hopefully. Now that this resolution is saying that the present, so we're stating that the present function of Parks Canada is to look after the places which are of significant natural and cultural heritage, to pass on to our children, pass on to all, for all times. Now that what the affirmative here is saying is that we should put natural and cultural heritage on the back burner, and in doing so, bring forward tourism. Put tourism as a first in priority. Now that we can't agree that this is right, sometimes I have a hard time agreeing with that. Now then, presently, our heritage, the manner. Now, to do so, we put tourism as our first order of importance, would be to present our heritage perhaps in a more touristic manner. Instead of creating the fortress of Louisbourg in the manner that it has been created as a very accurate representation of history, maybe we'd make some sort of plastic replica that would bring plenty of tourists and use other money, and maybe instead of ignore this entirely and build some sort of Canadian Disneyland. I mean, it'd probably bring in more tourists, but I don't think it'd do much for our children. Now then, we believe also that the heritage of this country is more important than the money, the temporary, possibly, money that this would bring in. Now then, there are already agencies in Canada, in every province, to look after tourism. So what we're going to get here is a duplication of services. We're going to have two services of the governments of this country doing the same purpose, trying to achieve the same purpose, maybe trying to compete with each other, saying our parks are better than some other attractions in other provinces, possibly. Now then, I don't believe this would be to the service or to the good of anybody. Also, we believe that in this country and in our national parks, there are very good systems to deal with those a significant amount of tourists that we do get. We don't believe presently that bringing in any more would do us any great help. Like the affirmative here stated, that we would aim to bring in perhaps American tourists or tourists from outside countries. Well, now, let me quote to you from the National Geographic. Now then, this particular article was on a park that was in the States next to a large population center, particularly in Yosemite National Park. And what happened when they turned this into a very commercial type park is, it says here, Californians have turned Yosemite into their backyard playground. On summer weekends, they roar up here, bumper to bumper. They come in here, they crash in here, and they're destroying the environment. They're destroying the heritage that is to be left to our children. Thank you.
I call upon the second affirmative debater to present her remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. As the affirmative, ladies and gentlemen, we have chosen to stick by the definitions we have presented. As the definition of the word function, as used, stated in the Gage Canadian Dictionary, and the definition of Parks Canada, as stated in the Canadian Yearbook, includes national parks, national historic parks and sites, historic waterways, wild rivers and byways administered by the federal government. Now, ladies and gentlemen, as it is well known, Canada has, I believe, 31 national parks, 70 national historic parks, 9 heritage canals, all mixed together, only part of the 1,100 sites, parks, etc., that are administered by Parks Canada today. Now, what Canada has to offer, I believe that the area or the landmass that is covered by our parks is approximately 130,000 square kilometers. Now, if this landmass perhaps was taken, put together, and placed in the United States, we would have more than 1/3 of the land of the United States. Now, don't you all feel that with such a wonderful opportunity, such wonderful things to offer to the other countries, especially to the United States, our close and very dear neighbors, as well as Europe and all the countries of the world, we have so many things to offer that we just have to be able to share it. Why do we hoard it all to ourselves? Why don't we just offer a chance for everyone to take part in it?
It'd be Caribou Jr.
Now, Canada is very, very well known for its diverse climate, its landscape. We have things in Canada that perhaps you'd have to take almost every country of Europe and put together to get. But we, as Canadians, have everything. We have almost everything that you could possibly want to see. I mean, we not only have so many things, the parks that go from east to west, to north to south, from the Terra Nova National Park on the east coast of Newfoundland, to the Pacific Rim National Park, which is seen on Vancouver Island, from Point Pelée, Canada's most southern point, to a national park on Baffin Island. Now, we as Canadians, we have so much. The point we are really trying to stress is that why keep it to ourselves? Now, there is at least one park or national historic site in each of the provinces and territories. Therefore, no certain province is going to be benefiting more from what we suggest than any other province. Each one is going to have an equal opportunity because each province has something different to offer. Now, as Canadians, we have to learn that we manage to try to keep what we have to ourselves. I think it's well known that we tend to undervalue what we have. The idea that we have all these wonderful national parks, all these things that many other countries they don't have an opportunity to view. However, it often takes publicity outside of Canada. It often takes other countries noticing and acknowledging what we have for us as Canadians to realize what we do have. Therefore, tourism really must be stressed. We must encourage other countries to come and to share what we have. We not only have living history, such as Lewisburg and all these many other national parks and sites where you can go and you can actually see how people lived, how people ruled their lives the way it used to be. We also have, for example, there's a Norse settlement in Newfoundland at Lazo Meadows. It was believed to be occupied in 1000 A.D. by the Northmen who came to Canada. Now, the United States doesn't have something like this. We have the new, we have the old, and we have everything that's in between. We have everything that everyone would want to see. Therefore, it must be stressed that tourism, which is so important, should not only be kept within Canada. We should share our bounty, share our beauty, and make sure that the other countries realize what we do have to offer. Thank you.
Second negative speaker will now deliver his address.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, worthy opponents, and fellow colleagues. We, as the negative, stick by our definitions as we believe they are more reasonable and clear than the affirmatives. Now, a function we define as duty in a job. Parks Canada, which we got from two reliable sources, renowned Webster International Dictionary and the World Book Dictionary. It states that the Parks Canada is the federal agency whose principal function is to protect for all time those places which are significant examples of Canada's national and cultural heritage, and also to encourage public understanding, appreciation, and enjoyment of this heritage in ways which leave it unimpaired for future generations. And that's stated from the policy that was settled with the federal government. Now, getting down to substance, national parks are reservoirs of nature where all the natural features of the area are protected and all wildlife is in sanctuary. Fossils must remain undisturbed. Trees and shrubs must remain undamaged. Even the wild flowers should not be picked, but left for our children to enjoy.
They'll be dead by the time our children are there.
National historic parks, such as the Fortress of Louisburg and the Alexander Graham Bell Museum, and national parks such as the Cape Breton Highlands National Park and Banff National Park, are important reminders of our heritage. They must be preserved. Referring to the Parks Canada policy, Section 3, Subsection 1, which states, Parks Canada will take the lead role in federal government activities relating to protecting and presenting places representative of Canada's natural and cultural heritage. Protection of Canada's natural and cultural heritage is entrenched in Parks Canada's policy. In fact, the entire policy of Parks Canada stresses protection of natural and historic heritage. In responding to visitors' needs, Parks Canada must ensure that facilities provided will not damage the natural environment of the park. Construction of such facilities will depend on the sensitivity of the environment to human impact. Now, it is obvious that the present policy of Parks Canada is to protect the environment, and that the environment is of greatest importance. The affirmative, by supporting this resolution, apparently wants to sacrifice the environment for the sake of tourists and money. It goes without saying that care and preservation of the animals is an important aspect of the policy also. Elk Island National Park in Alberta, that's 23 miles east of Edmonton, was the first national park to be set apart primarily as a wild animal preserve. It was originally reserved in 1906 as a sanctuary to help fight the extinction of such animals as the elk moose and the mule deer. The area eventually became a national park in 1913. It has played an important function in saving the plains bison from extinction. The function has proved successful as over 600 plains bison are now maintained. Proof that this works. The original intention, thank you.
We shall now hear the speech of the third affirmative debater.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. It seems a shame that today we're having a wonderful debate over a fantastic resolution reduced to terms, whereas we can't come to term on what to debate for. Maybe the opposition is hiding behind their terms. For example, oh, good comeback. For the example,
We thought so.
the term function defined as a duty and a job. Now, we stated in our definition function as a use, we gave a source, the Gage Canadian Dictionary. I didn't hear any source coming from the opposition from the second member's speech. They didn't define Parks Canada. They gave a source, yes, the Webster's International Dictionary, and then they used another source, the New World Book, Yearbook, I believe, something like that. Whereas, you note in our definition that we use the Canadian Yearbook, pertaining to Canadian parks. Therefore, the terms which the opposition are trying to hide behind don't exactly fall away. Now, as the affirmative, we believe that our parks can be used productively without causing damage. What we're trying to advocate here are special package vacations. I don't know if anyone in the audience has ever heard of these, but they're vacations in which people have a starting point to go through a little tour, everything's set up. For example, the Baffin Islands and the Pagnerton Pass, which is a special vacation which is being used in the Canadian parks. Now, we don't see why not these can be used. We don't see why not. They're being used right now. For example, the Lindblad travel of past September 1984 had a boat going through the Arctic Passage where they had champagne celebrating. They were the first passenger ship through the Northwest Passage. And this boat had a maximum number on the boat. They filled it. If people are going for these offbeat vacations, if people are going for these new experiences, why can't Canada provide these things? As it was stated by the Honourable Second Member, I like to quote a song. Canada is the Rocky Mountains. Canada is Cape Breton Island. Canada is a country made for tourists.
Americans on them.
Why shouldn't we use them? Now, it's very easy to use these things around our own Cape Breton Highlands. For example, the Cape Breton Highlands National Park, we have beaches for the summer, we have trails for hiking, we have cross-country ski places. Winter, we have downhill skiing. Why shouldn't this be advertised? Why shouldn't this be put to use? As was stated before by the Honourable First Member, we do have an unemployment problem. Wake up and smell the coffee, members of the opposition. We do have an unemployment problem. What the opposition is saying, no, that's not important. We have to preserve our national parks. Well, what do I say? I say, sure, preserve our national parks, and when the country goes bankrupt, we're going to stand there and say, yes, we have no money, but hey, look, we got great parks. It doesn't make sense. For these vacations to come about, we would have to advocate increased cooperation between the Federal Ministry of Industry, Trade and Commerce and the Provincial Ministry of Tourism. In the few remaining seconds that I have, I'd like to make a couple of points about the member's speech. First member stated that we're trying to preserve our national cultural heritage. What are they trying to do? Are they going to put it on the back burner? No, we're not going to put it on the back burner. That's a callous attitude. What we want to do is promote our national heritage. The first member said in the same speech, but we don't want these American tourists coming up here like the Californians coming up bumper to bumper wrecking our place. Well, what do you want to do? Put slip covers on the country? You want to keep them from doing anything? They're saying that the parks are going to become better attractions than others. This will not happen. I will go over this again in my rebuttal at the end of the talk. Thank you.
The third negative debater will now deliver his team's final constructive speech.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I simply do not know where to start. Goodness me. We have everything. I admit Canada has everything. We have beautiful lakes, beautiful rivers, beautiful parks, and it is the responsibility of the Provincial Department of Tourism to promote these. Canada does promote its tourism. Canada should promote its tourism, and Canada will promote its tourism through the Provincial Departments of Tourism set up within each province. Parks Canada should not be responsible for, as its principal function, which we define, I'll get to that later, which its principal function is to protect the environment, not to attract tourists to Canada. Duty, as we define from the Webster International Dictionary and the World Book International Dictionary, a function is a duty in a job. We check two sources, and we have defined it as duty in a job from these two sources. I have not even seen a copy of the Gage Dictionary so that they could prove to us that this was in fact the definition. And we have defined Parks Canada, the federal agency whose principal function is to protect for all times those places which are significant examples of Canada's natural and cultural heritage, and also to encourage public understanding, appreciation, and enjoyment of this heritage in which ways which leave it unimpaired for future generations. That is government policy. We admit tourists are very important to Canada. They are very important to preserve, but are they more important, pardon me, than preserving Canada's natural heritage? Are tourists more important? Tourists are important, but they are not more important than sacrificing our heritage. We, the negative, believe that the principal function of Parks Canada should be to protect for all times examples of Canada's natural and historic heritage, and to leave them unimpaired for the enjoyment of future generations. I cannot believe what I'm hearing coming from the affirmative. I cannot believe that they are so ignorant as to not even know what the policy of Parks Canada is, as not know what the Provincial Department of Tourism's policy is. James Butler, chairman of the Edmonton chapter of National and Provincial Parks Association of Canada, was quoted as saying, "The geography and wildlife of Canada are our crown jewels. You don't see cities and skyscrapers on Canada's posters, you see parks and wildlife." And it should be the principal function of Parks Canada
to protect our national parks and to protect the wildlife that live in them. If protecting our heritage were to be of less importance than attracting tourists, it would be like selling off our crown jewels. That is what the affirmative is proposing. They're saying, hey, it's more important that people in Canada be employed than that we have preserved our natural heritage and our parks. They're saying that it is more important. Well, here's some stats for you. A DESMA quarterly report poll of 1,500 voting-age Canadians showed that 84% considered protection of the environment more important than keeping consumer prices down. And this report is used by the Cabinet of Canada to decide its policy. These Canadians are saying that the environment and the parks are more important than the consumer prices and that sort of stuff. They are more important. If we sacrifice what we have today, if we sacrifice our natural heritage and our parks, then we'll have no tourism industry at all. There won't be any tourism industry if we let the tourists run ruthlessly through these parks and just destroy them like the affirmative seems to want them to do. We have, as it is now, we have groups who do promote Canadian tourism. Yes, I admit we have everything. I thought Laurel was very smart to pick up that Canada has everything. And we do promote it. To say we don't promote it is a terrible, terrible misstatement. Canada does promote its tourism through the provincial departments of tourism. The affirmative has not pointed out who would now have the principal function of protecting the parks in Canada if it were not Parks Canada. Why don't we make up a group called Tourism Canada, and they could promote tourism for Canada, but not Parks Canada? Thank you very much.
Finally, we shall now hear the official rebuttals from each debater. Again, first commencing with the negative side, and the first speakers will begin.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Moderator. Always interesting listening to Leo. Now then, also, I believe we have restated our terms, and we believe they are accurate. I would point out that we quoted 2 sources. The affirmative here quoted 1. Now then, aren't we better? Now, also, to bring out a point that the affirmative has brought out, I very much doubt that we will go bankrupt. We are among the 10 richest countries in the world. I very much doubt that an increased amount of tourism would create bankruptcy in this country. And to tell you the truth, you see, these parks here, natural reservoirs of an ecological system preserve the ecology of the country. And in case the affirmative doesn't quite understand what this means, it means you have to have protected woodlands, etc., to provide sufficient clean water, for example, and that sort of thing. If you have a highly industrialized, or if you have a highly commercial park area with all kinds of American tourists on there with their RVs with the plug-in sewers, then we are not going to have clean water in this country. Now then, the second affirmative speaker here seems to have pointed out that we have all these natural resources here. Why not invite all the Americans up? Well, we do invite some. Now that we keep this on a limit. Now, we keep this on a limit here, as we'll protect our country, as not to be harmful and to provide perhaps the maximum amount of jobs as we can. But as I stated before, in Yosemite National Park, they showed what they happened. They do not respect their own lands. They come charging up in their droves, and they absolutely destroy their own parks. Now, what are they going to do to ours? What are we going to have left after this affirmative side is through with us? So, in final conclusion, I believe I've stated my points, and I'd like to say, if Parks Canada will not give its first priority to protect our natural and cultural heritage, who will? Thank you.
Well, Mr. Moderator, there are so many questions that the negative has brought to our attention that, and the one that's most prominent is the fact that we, the affirmative, don't know what the Parks Canada policy is. Here it is right here, okay? And it says that certain places representative of Canada's natural and cultural heritage are of importance to all Canadians. These special places should be given the highest degree of protection and managed for the benefit of all Canadians within a national system so as to leave them unimpaired for future generations.
Parks Canada, through the Parliament of Canada, is charged with this responsibility, not function, responsibility. And there's no disputing the fact that Parks Canada does carry this responsibility through wholeheartedly. But that's not the question. The question is functions of Parks Canada. The negative has brought to our attention that the primary purpose should be the preservation and protection of Parks Canada. They harp on protection of the environment, the preservation of the park, so much that it's like they don't want anyone in there. They're going to stop you at the door and say, you can't come in, don't touch the flowers. If we let you in, just walk real close, don't touch anything, okay? Just take a look, but that's it. And the point about some Americans, we'll let some Americans in. What are you going to do, stop them at the door or what? And we're not just talking about Americans here. We're talking about foreign tourists everywhere. We're not concentrating with the Americans. Sure, they're closest to us, but we want to go beyond that. We want to go across to Europe. We want to bring tourists in. The negative has brought to the point that we're doing this, that we're concerned solely with the idea of tourism and money. Of course we're not. But we're looking at it in terms of what it can do for Canada, the benefits that it can bring. Does the negative not realize the unemployment situation? Tourism is a means. It's an industry that uses services. It doesn't take advantage of non-renewable resources. It's something that's always there, and we can build on that to benefit our own country. The fact that we should be so concerned with the protection of the environment and the preservation of the parks so as to stop tourists at the door and say you can't come in. They think tourists are barbarians. We have tourists presently now, and they're doing just fine. There's nothing wrong with our parks. They're great. And you always have Park Canada officials doing wonderful. So we can prove that we can bring tourists in, we can have money, improve the situation, and everything is going to be just great.
I now call upon the second members of each team to deliver their rebuttal, again, commencing with the negative.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I would like to state that the negative will stick by their definitions. I always wondered, I was going to ask the question, but I've passed it off. It's not important information. What is the color of the cover of the Cage Dictionary? Anyway, okay. Now, the original intention of creating national parks, okay, was to preserve and present nature in all its physical beauty. When you compare this with the idea of, let's say, attracting tourists, the latter idea seems rather new, or rather a new concern. You know, if protection is Parks Canada's responsibility, it must be their duty. Okay? If the affirmative is so interested in attracting tourists, oh, this really disturbs me, really. The range of their interests is very broad. From racetracks to casinos, artwork to architecture, landmarks to celebrities. Yes, there is or are more profitable ways to satisfy tourists than exposing them to the rugged lands that are better off left to the preservationists and the wild inhabitants, namely the wildlife and the plants and the fowl. If it is so obvious that the theme of the preserving nature will lead to an endless appreciation and admiration of nature, why does the affirmative want to change the successful policy? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as the negative have said, they have contested our definitions. They have redefined function as they think it should be defined. However, they have continued to present their arguments in view of our definition and seeing the word function as a use. They are being so narrow-minded, so closed-minded about this whole thing that they're just refusing to see the entire issue that's presented at hand. Mr. Parson, who is so very worried about plug-in sewers, and Mr. Shaw, who seems to believe that attracting tourists is something new. Well, I don't believe I woke up last week and heard on the radio that they're suddenly going to start attracting tourists to Canada. I think it's been going on for quite a while. Now, Mr. Parsons, in his first constructive speech, seemed so worried about the idea that perhaps some provinces would benefit more from these new tourists coming in than would other provinces.
One, however, I did quote, state in my constructive speech that each province and each territory in Canada has at least one national park. Therefore, it's going to be evenly distributed. Mr. Shaw, who seems so worried about protecting the fossils, the trees, the shrubs, that is true. It's one of the main reasons for Parks Canada, to protect what we have, to keep things from becoming extinct. Well, that's fine. As my colleague has stated, are we going to put slip covers on it? Are we going to wait around and say, well, you can go in, but you just can't touch? What do you think we are trying to protect it for? To show people, to share what we have. Well, what are we going to do with all this beauty? What are we going to do with all of these wonderful things that we have that nobody else does? We're going to keep it for ourselves. We're not going to let anybody else see it. What if they just look at a poster? They don't have to come and look at it. They can just watch TV and see the commercials and see all the wonderful things that we have to offer. That's just fine. But the thing is, if it's being protected, it's being protected for a reason. It's being protected because we want to show it off. We want to share what we have. Thank you.
I now call upon the third debaters from each team to deliver their official rebuttal. Again, commencing with the negative.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Well, I'd like to comment in refutation to some of the comments made by the members of the affirmative. The affirmative were quoting from Parks Canada policy, so in refutation I'd like to make some quotes from the Parks Canada policy as well. The policy states that Parks Canada should cooperate with the provincial departments of tourists to help attract tourists, but this should not be the principal function of Parks Canada. So therefore we have stated that parks are very important to Canada because they preserve our natural heritage, they preserve Canada's historic heritage, but they are not of less importance than tourists. We have stated that tourists are very important to Canada. We do need tourists, but we do not sacrifice the environment of the parks, the environment of Canada, for the sake of tourists. The affirmative in their endless sarcasm have made comments like, oh, we'll show them a poster, we'll show them an advertisement. Yes, the Parks Canada does show posters, they do show advertisements and that, and they do inform the public about the parks, and they do encourage the public to come to the parks, but not at the sacrifice of the environment of the park. Parks Canada policy subsection 2, section 2, subsection 5.5 reads, and this is in refutation to comments made earlier, efforts will be made to ensure that visitor use does not disturb the historic environment of the park. But under the affirmative's proposal, the policy would probably read that efforts will be made to ensure that the historic environment of the park does not disturb the visitors. They seem to be wanting to sacrifice our parks for the sake of visitors and tourists. Yes, we need tourists. Yes, we need tourist dollars, but we do not need to sacrifice what we have for the sake of tourists. We pointed out that a poll conducted by the federal government showed that 84% of those surveyed are more in favor, they consider protecting the environment more important than keeping consumer prices down. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Well, I've waded through the points and sometimes points of the opposition and come up with the three main arguments that the opposition has put forward why tourism should not, to attract tourists, should not be the principal function. One, they said to protect our heritage. Who says that we're going to dump a plastic monument in the middle of Louisbourg to attract tourists? It was never stated. It was never stated. It was never even implied. People who go to Louisbourg want to see our cultural heritage, do they not? They want to see what it was like in the 1700s. They want to see these things. Therefore, we are promoting our cultural heritage. If we attract more tourists in to see such wonderful things, we're promoting our heritage. First point, gone. Second point, we're preservation of the environment. We're sacrificing the environment if we let the tourists run rampant. Now, on the 100th anniversary of Parks Canada, I do believe that that they have done a wonderful job as it is now, preserving, excuse me, Mr. Moderator, may I ask for some order? That we are preserving some preserving our parks. We're not going to let tourists run ruthlessly, as the Honorable Mr. Doyle says. We are not going to let them rip down our trees. Well, sometimes honorable. We're not going to let all these things happen. If you listen to my speech, I said that we're going to promote these natural, peaceful holidays, painting in the Rockies, skiing through Ingonish, all these wonderful things. You don't hear, I don't even get the connotation of a car blasting its horn or people ripping down Yosemite Park. And the second point, gone. Third point, tourists run ruthlessly through our parks. I've never seen a tourist run ruthlessly through Ingonish, have you? No, I don't think
I've done it myself.
Somehow I believe that, Mr. Doyle. And according to the poll, 84% of they want to protect our parks. How many of those 84% had jobs? How many wanted a job? That's the question. We're trying to promote employment. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
On behalf of the debating organization, I thank the timekeeper for his assistance. I congratulate all debaters on...
I call this debate to order. I am pleased to welcome you all to this third round of today's debating forum sponsored by Parks Canada. The question before us today is there a distinct Canadian culture? The affirmative team consists of the first speaker, Nisar Puck, the second member, Alan Pomeroy, and third debater, Scott Sims. Arguing the negative case will be the first speaker, Suzanne Chisholm, the second member, Kim Murphy, and third debater, Stephen Antle.
Excuse me, Mr. Moderator. Could I ask you on the resolution whether it's distinctive or distinct? I believe that we are distinctive.
I'm sorry, this is what I've given. There is a question on the resolution whether it is distinct or distinctive.
Distinctive on our sheets.
I have distinct.
I was given distinct. Who gave me distinct?
Is there any difference with distinct? Well, we have distinct, so we can do it our way.
Yes, that's what is on the,
On the sheets that went out to the school, it's distinct? Distinctive on the sheets that went out to the school. All right. I'll restate the resolution. Is there a distinctive Canadian culture? Thank you. Our timekeeper is Kim Rideout, and I, Ruth Ann Gillen, am your moderator. Each debater will deliver a 4-minute constructive speech, after which he or she will be cross-examined for up to 2 minutes by an opponent. Debaters will cross-examine opponents for up to 2 minutes each and have 2-minute rebuttal defense summary time. If a question has been asked before the time limit expires, a short answer may be given. Cross-examination commences immediately after a constructive speech has ended. The examiner will not be reintroduced before questioning begins. Would the timekeeper please explain the system for signaling time remaining to debaters?
Thank you. Okay, there will be time cards held up. For your first speech, you will have 4 minutes, and the time cards will be held up. And I will stand when you have 15 seconds raised left, and when I sit, you must sit with me. And for your cross-examination and for your rebuttal, you will have 2 minutes. And again, I will stand 15 seconds, and when I sit, you must sit with me.
Thank you. Are there any questions on the time? To continue with just a very brief review of some of the rules, during cross-examination, debaters should treat one another with dignity, as the judges will penalize debaters guilty of rudeness, flippancy, browbeating, or any attempt to personally belittle another debater. And I guess we're all judges here today. We can decide in our own minds. While cross-examining, debaters should ask fair questions on pertinent subjects, though these need not arise out of the preceding speech. Examiners will be penalized for arguing with witnesses or making speeches instead of asking questions. They are required to give witnesses a reasonable opportunity to answer questions, though they may ask me to cut short witnesses who stall or answer at unreasonable length. While being cross-examined, debaters shall give direct, honest answers They must not evade questions put to them, but they may impose reasonable qualifications on their answers. The only question they can ask is for clarification of a confusing query, and they may not refuse to answer a question even if it appears irrelevant. If an answer to a question is not pertinent, however, I may direct the witness to answer properly. I will not entertain any objections other than those noted above. No heckling or other interjections are in order. But after all speeches have concluded, I will give both teams an opportunity to point out violations of rules by their opponents. Are there any questions regarding the rules of debate? I call upon the first affirmative speaker to present his constructive speech, including all definitions, then be cross-examined by the third negative speaker.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Bienvenue à tous les mesdames et messieurs qui sont ici pour le débat. Cette après-midi-là, le sujet de notre débat, c'est le distinctif culture canadienne, maintenant en anglais. Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, members of the negative team, to this debate this afternoon in a celebration of Heritage Day. The resolution before us is there a distinctive Canadian culture? We, as the affirmative team, have defined distinctive as having the meaning of distinguishing from all others, and a Canadian culture as being the cumulative effect for the sum, if you will, of the entire Canadian peoples in terms of skills, languages, various cultural and art aspects. And just to paraphrase of this very prima facie, we feel, affirmative definition, is that does Canada indeed have a distinguishing culture, one that differentiates it from all the countries in the world? And to address this issue, we the affirmative believe, Madam Moderator, that it is quite incumbent upon us all to realize that Canada is a mosaic. It is a country made up of many nationalities and many cultures, to give one. For it is in many that Canada finds its distinctiveness and makes its mark, if you will, on the rest of the world. And this will be the crux of the affirmative case, Madam Moderator, is the fact that in difference, there is a combination to form one totally different culture, or totally distinguished or distinctive culture, Madam Moderator. I'd just like to take a look at this sign that's behind you, Madam Moderator, and I think it's very appropriate to the topic today because it is indeed Canada. For that matter, I am Canada, and you are all Canada. Madam Moderator, Canada is a nation of many different peoples, many different areas, combining to make one. We in Canada are not a melting pot, however. We allow individuality and recognize specific groups by providing for them, for example, the native peoples in our country. And it is in this way that we really differ from many other countries that are considered, quote, melting pots. Now, as for the definition, the actual artistic definition of what a mosaic is, we see it as an inlaid work constructed by a process of making pictures or designs by inlaying small bits of colored glass, tiles, etc. For an operational definition, I believe that we can turn to this resolution. For Canada is indeed a mosaic in this sense. Picture, if you will, the stained glass window of a church. It consists of many various colors, each existing in its own entities, but combining to form and produce the integrity or essence of the whole. I think that's very important to the debate today, for that is the main point in what we're talking about, the distinctiveness or the distinctive nature of the Canadian culture. And I'd really like to ask this question now, Madam Moderator, is the question, why are we here today? Very simple question, Madam Moderator. The answer not so simple. We are here as a celebration of our heritage, of our culture as Canadians. Something that we, the affirmative, will not see taken away by the negative team. Something that makes us special. Something that makes each one of you different from an American, from a Briton, from a Deutsch. Everyone is special. And it is in this distinctive nature that Canada finds its differential nature of culture. I'd like now to bring up a seal, if you will, or the summary of the argument in thanking Madam Moderator in a number of different languages to demonstrate the Canadian cultural diversity. Dhonnabad, Bengali, Sakaran, and Arabic. Merci beaucoup. En français. Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. And I'll stand for cross-examination.
Madam Moderator, I would like to propose a few questions to the first speaker of the affirmative. Do you believe in our Canadian Bill of Rights and Freedoms, which was implemented on August 10th, 1960, and was enacted by Her Majesty the Queen with the consent of the House of Commons of Canada?
I believe it's called the Charter of Rights and Freedoms now. Yeah, I do believe it, yes.
Then do you believe in freedom of expression for all Canadians?
Definitely.
Do you feel that a person should be able to express his or her own mother nationality, being defined as expressed, calling themselves a Ukrainian, calling themselves German, calling themselves French before calling themselves a Canadian?
Are they allowed to do that?
Do you feel it's right that they should?
No.
So what you're actually saying is that there's no distinct culture then?
No, I don't. I say that you were first Canadian. I'd like to take example of our Miss Graham sitting there. She's wearing a Scottish kilt, I believe. She is Canadian, but she is maybe I know of Scottish in origin. I don't see anything wrong with her expressing herself in that way. No, I feel it's right and it's perfectly acceptable.
But what you're saying actually is that you feel that she should call herself a Canadian before she calls herself Scottish.
Well, I believe she holds Canadian citizenship, so I should say yes.
Well, there's such a thing as dual citizenship.
Well, if they do, I don't hold the majority of Canadians hold dual citizenships, but I'm sure if they do, I wouldn't object to them calling themselves Scottish and Canadian, but the majority hold Canadian citizenships, so I would hold that they should be called Canadians.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Call upon the first negative debater to deliver her main address, challenging any definitions initial, then be cross-examined by the third affirmative speaker.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Okay, I'd like to begin by redefining the terms. Okay, distinctive, we did a pretty good job, I'd say. The act of perceiving as being separate or different. Canadian is an adjective which refers to anything pertaining to the nation of Canada. Culture is a particular stage in advancement of civilization comprising of race, religion, and ethnic origin, meaning simply the traits of a certain group of people. I'd like to begin by saying that on October 8, 1971, Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau tabled in the House of Commons the government official party on multiculturalism. He stated there is no official culture in Canada, nor does any ethnic group take precedence over another. This is just simply to say that Canada is a multicultural nation. Because in every corner of Canada there lives immigrants from foreign ethnical backgrounds. I mean, you can name practically anyone from a different background. Canada's got one of them. Now, Canada's a relatively young country. How can it have its own distinct culture developed in a mere 118 years? That's only 4 generations. It's simple, it just can't. And the vast majority of all Canadians are descendants of European and Asian immigrants. Much of these people still carry out their customs from their mother country. And example is, like, large sections of entire cities are exclusively occupied by Chinese people, say Chinatown in Vancouver and Toronto. And they can still carry out the same customs. They have Chinese stores, restaurants, and boutiques. You drive through places and you see things like Indian basket weaving and Italian foods and Ukrainian churches. In fact, there's no typical stereotype Canadian, because that statement just totally contradicts his statement in favor of a distinct Canadian culture. We'll take hypothetically, we'll take a chocolate bar, for instance, that was made in Switzerland. If that chocolate bar is imported into Canada, it's in Canada, it's living there, it's living, but it isn't really, but it's in Canada, it is still a Swiss chocolate bar. Just because it's in Canada doesn't make it Canadian, and that can draw a parallel to people. Just because they're born in Switzerland, they come over and they keep their heritage, just doesn't make them, they may be a Canadian citizen, but they're still by heritage and customs and culture and traits, in every way they're still Swiss. There's just no unique Canadian culture. Now, there's no Canadian language as such. I mean, there are 2 official languages, English and French, yet they're both from other countries. What this means is that there's no exclusive language to Canada.
For English and French are two of the most widespread spoken languages in the world. And I'd like to just conclude by saying that Canada really doesn't have its own distinct culture. The only culture it has is multiculturalism. Good.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Let's see. Are you aware that the Bill of Rights that was adopted in 1961, that was the date you used, by the Deaton-Baker government was supplanted by the Pierre Trudeau's Charter of Rights in 1982?
Could you repeat that question, please?
Sorry. The Bill of Rights that was adopted by John Deaton-Baker, the one you're quoting from.
No, it wasn't the Bill of Rights.
It wasn't the Bill of Rights?
Yeah, it wasn't in 1961.
Oh, then what was the date of it?
71.
1971?
Yes.
I'm not aware of anything that came out of that era. Is it under John Deaton-Baker's leadership?
I said Pierre, I'll let you know.
1971? Okay. Maybe perhaps you're getting confused between the biculturalism report, the commission.
Oh.
During the biculturalism scare or whatever, are you aware that during that time there was a scare of the Quiet Revolution going on in Quebec?
I'm not aware. No.
You're not aware of the Quiet Revolution, of the cultural genesis going on in Quebec?
No.
I see. Are you aware that in Quebec in 1971 that people were kidnapped and killed for the belief that Quebec should be a separate province, a separate country?
No.
No? You're not aware of that cultural aspect of our society?
I was a kid then, and I don't...
Have you grown up? Let's see. In other words, you're not aware that at the time that report came out, that Canada was under cultural stresses?
No, no.
You were not aware. You're not aware that during that time Canada was afraid that it would not retain its duty as a nation?
No.
In other words, you don't even realize that we have overcome that and we have a new sense of identity today.
I don't feel it's been overcome.
You don't feel it's been overcome by something that you don't even know anything about?
You just told me what it was.
Good sir.
I call upon the second affirmative.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. The affirmative speaker, my first affirmative speaker, my colleague, started off in a few languages, which points out, indeed, the effect of multiculturalism in Canada at this stage. I was to introduce my speech with another German saying thank you, Madam Moderator, danke schön, and a Italian one, grazie molto, but I think the effect of that has already been realized by you and the audience here today. I'd like to redefine the word culture as we have defined it in the first place. Culture is the sum total of all the customs, skills, languages, and other attributes of the people of the country or nation. And also, I'd like to stress the word mosaic, as my colleague mentioned here. It's very important that we get the meaning of this word across to you, the audience, and you, Madam Moderator. Mosaic. In a mosaic society, such as the one Canada, such as Canada today, one can have many cultures, or I may use the word cultures, or many nationalities or groups, many ethnic groups and varieties, and still each one may retain his or her, each citizen may retain his or her individuality as demonstrated by the Scottish culture today. The culture is indeed the sum total, so that is what we were talking about when we mentioned culture, not just all the individual cultures, because there certainly are a lot, as demonstrated by a few of the posters behind us here today, and also by the people in the audience. Another important point that distinguishes Canadians from other people of the world, the environmental situation that we Canadians are in. Well, firstly, it's one of 4 seasons. Secondly, we're the second largest country in the world, and we have a great land here that we can do almost, well, whatever we please within reasonable limits, of course. And it's this freedom and these conditions that put forward the chance for Canadians to come out with the spirit they have. They're so young, they're so vibrant, on the move, such fine examples as our great athletes who are among the best in the world, including Alex Bowman and Gaetan Boucher, as well as the Canadian ski team. These are fine examples of Canadians. They have a great spirit, and they are people who are willing to practice and practice until they know they can come out the best in the world, not just the best in Canada, but the best in the world. And another example, of course, is the hockey teams, both on the junior level and the NHL level, which the Canadian teams won on both levels this year. An economic system, on the more serious note, is indeed an integral part of any society, and I'd like to point out the differences in the economic system of Canada and a lot of other countries. Namely, Canada is an economic system of mercantile capitalism. Now, there are three types: mercantile capitalism, industrial capitalism, and corporate capitalism. Mercantile capitalism is one which was mentioned here today by a debater, whereby hewers of wood and drawers of water produce or bring forth natural resources from the land and for export to other countries, such as industrial capitalist countries, such as the United States, who transform these raw materials into things like airplanes, ships, boats, etc. And of course, the corporate capitalism is just a different one altogether, where buying and selling entities such as businesses are the primary means of making money. Canada, when people look at Canadians in general, they think of people who have this great land of theirs behind them to support whatever they do, and they have so many resources at their disposal, and this is what they want to be, and this is how people view Canadians. Thank you. I now stand for cross-examination.
Okay, I'd like you to just answer this question with a simple yes or no, okay? Do you agree that multiculturalism can be and is defined as many cultures pooling together to form a single nation?
Yes, I do.
And although this nation is one nation with the same government and contained within the same landmass, it can still retain the differing heritages of the widespread range of foreign people?
It most certainly can.
Well then, do you also agree that there are Eskimos, Indians, Chinese, and Japanese people living in Canada, making it their permanent home here?
I certainly do.
Good. And does the same hold true for Russians, Italians, Germans, Hungarians, and Spaniards?
Mm-hmm.
And how about Buddhists and Hindus?
Definitely.
Good. Now, is this not multiculturalism? Is this multiculturalism?
Well, as you described multiculturalism a few minutes ago, you described it as a sum total, did you not?
No, I did not. Is it yes and no, please? Answers?
What was the question, please?
The question was, is this not multiculturalism, all these people living in Canada as one nation, yet retaining their own backgrounds?
As one nation, that's
yes
the key
or no,
phrase there. It is, yes.
Yes. And therefore, wouldn't it be an downright contradiction to say in a single statement that a nation is multiculturalism and at the same time have its own distinct culture?
No, of course not.
Well, what does the word multi imply? Many, many cultures?
Yes, it does.
Many is not the same as distinct. Distinct means one and own. That's a total contradiction. Did not agree?
But what about culture? You neglect to bring in the word culture into that. Culture is indeed the sum total.
Yes or no will be sufficient.
Well, no.
Then you're saying that you're contradicting words, the meaning of words, that multicultural, multi means many. And you just agreed with me totally that all these many cultures do live in Canada. They retain their own cultural status, yet you're saying that Canada has a distinct culture, a Canadian culture?
Well, may I say a few words to clarify the situation?
Yes, okay.
I think a culture is the sum total, and it is indeed a multicultural country here in Canada.
Then can you say it has its own distinct culture, it's multicultural?
Yeah, I do.
No, it's a total contradiction. Thank you, Madam Moderator.
I call upon the second negative debater to present her main speech, then be cross-examined by the first affirmative speaker.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. To start with, I'd like to redefine the definition of culture. Culture is a particular stage in advancement in civilization comprising of race, religion, and ethnic origin, meaning the traits of a certain group of people. The honorable members of the affirmative seem to believe that the culture or way of life in which exists in Canada is so diverse or so different that it cannot be paralleled to that which exists in other countries worldwide. Personally, Madam Moderator, I find it very hard to take. Point out to me one aspect of a way of life which is strictly Canadian culture, meaning what spectacular thing are we known for as Canadians? The skills which many people in Canada possess are similar to those found in other countries. Are our own people so different from others that we are unique? Canada was founded by immigrants from the old countries, immigrants who brought with them as much of their old way of life as possible. As a result, Canadian culture has many elements which were, if you will, borrowed from other countries. Does this make us unique to have borrowed things from other countries? If anything, this increases the similarities of our culture with those of the old world countries. How can something which is so common be referred to as distinct? That, Madam Moderator, is a contradiction itself. To ensure harmonious coexistence and mutually beneficial growth in a so culturally diverse a population, the federal government in 1971 promulgated the policy of mutualism. This policy fundamentally ensures the civilization, the cultural freedom, and equality of all Canadians, and asserts no ethnoculture group should take precedence over another. I now stand for question.
Thank you. First thing I'd like to ask you is, I think the challenge that you issued in your speech. I'd like to ask you, could you name one other country in this world, not just anywhere on the earth, a lot of countries pick from, could you name one that has such a large population of English, French, and native people in terms of American Indian living in such large amounts?
In any country?
Yeah.
Which,
as well as Eskimos, Indian, large, okay?
the United States.
Eskimos in the United States, okay?
Alaska, what about Alaska?
Are there, what about the French, there's no, is the French population in the United States as large as the French population in Canada, in the 6 million Quebecois?
Not as large.
Okay. In your definition of multiculturalism, you seem to say that there are many aspects to it. Is it not possible that we, here today, are a certain group?
We are a certain group, yes.
Are there specific characteristics that all of us exhibit that could be attributed to this group? Are there specific traits or characteristics that could be attributed to this group?
Yes.
Could we then say that enlarge this group and call the country maybe Canada?
Yes.
Then, by that, what you said then, there would be specific traits and attributes that could be attributed to that group of people.
Yes, but there's different cultures.
Wouldn't that be one culture being made up from many?
No, not necessarily.
Okay. What is heritage to you?
Heritage to me? Something which happened in the past, and which is important to me.
Important to you? Do you think that everyone in Canada shares in the heritage because they are all Canadian? They all have specific backgrounds, but they're all coming to a country where they are to pass on to further generations their cultures, their heritage, which is thereby considered the Canadian culture?
They all have different heritage.
Right, but they're all passing it on to their Canadian sons and daughters.
Yes.
So they're passing on the Canadian culture.
It'd be the different heritage, though.
But it's Canadian. They're passing on the Canadian culture, are they not? By what you answered earlier. So they are passing on the Canadian culture. Thank you very much.
I call upon the third affirmative speaker to deliver his main address, then be cross-examined by the second negative debater.
Habla. Dziękuję. That's Polish. And to speak in Quebecese, thanks, bud. Madam Moderator, ladies and gentlemen, we have used different languages in this debate to illustrate the multicultural nature of Canada. We are many and we are one. We are unified by our heritage, which brings us together into one common binding, into one country. That is Canada. Now, there is a letter, an open letter to Brian Mulroney in the Globe and Mail, and it's dated February 13th, 1985, and it says, the CBC has been essential in preserving the upper half of the North American continent, Canada, as a proud and distinctive nature. Now, if the Globe and Mail says we're a distinctive nature, who's going to argue with it? Now, forgive my impertinence, I'm not wearing my suit coat because it's rather warm in here, but I've noticed that in Canada, we are unlike other nations. We are distinctive. We are very distinctive, and we do not accept the definition as redefined by the second speaker in the negative. We are, as the first speaker said, culture is the sum of all aspects of society, of all aspects of Canadian society, and this makes us different. What other country has done the clubs to serenade us to sleep by? What other country has the spoons to remember by? What other country has J.D. Lang and the Recline from Calgary to allow us to bop by? What other country has Bryan Adams? Does America have these things? Does Britain have these things? No, they're Canadian, and we are proud to have them. Not only in popular music, in classical music also, Madam Moderator. André Gounod is a Canadian classical composer. Glenn Gould, the pyrotechnical genius, who played the piano with such genius that he was renowned across the world. In our literature, we have Margaret Lawrence. We have Margaret Atwood. We have Farley Mowat. Is he American? I think not. And by the way, as it's been said, it's not Eskimo, it's Inuit. Inuit. We recognize that they're called Inuit. And we have Inuit. We also have many other things that other countries don't have. We have, we were challenged to name these things. We have the RCMP. We have Ed Broadbent. We have Joey Smallwood. We have Brian Mulroney, but some say he's American. Anyway. And appalled at the negative. We say that Canada is a common nation? It's not a common nation. We are magical. We are a nation unified with one cause, one binding, our heritage. And we are Canada, and we are not common. And everybody here should go away with this feeling on this celebration. We are not common. We are not. What is a Canadian? I believe that's the whole basis for this debate. What is a Canadian? If we look at the different peoples in Canada, we can get an idea what a Canadian truly is. We have Scots, not me, Scotsmen, heritage, this frame, who wear kilts. We have English, who love their queen. We have French, that retain their language and customs. We have Acadians, who speak neither English nor French, but retain their own language and their own beliefs. I've seen states with their blue turbans and little kerpas walking around. That's allowed for an expression. But what is the common binding between all these people? Their heritage. They are proud of their heritage. They are also proud of being Canadians. And that is the subject for this debate. Thank you.
An yes or no answer would be sufficient. People from France who emigrated into Canada, have they kept their language and cultures?
They have, but it's been augmented by the Canadian climate, as my colleague said, rather.
You're saying that they haven't?
Oh, they've retained the language per se, but it's also been modified with words like toboggan, which
Our
are
question is, have they maintained the culture and the language of French from France? Have they maintained that? Yes or no, please?
You can't say yes or no to that question because they've changed. They've become Canadian, French Canadians.
Yes, but have they maintained their language?
Partly so and partly not.
How can you say partly? They speak half French and half English?
Well, my God, they don't go to the French court anymore. Some of them have changed in different ways. In France, they did not fur trap. In Canada, they do. And that is a changing of the culture.
Okay, fine. What about people from Poland?
What about them? What do you mean?
Who emigrated into Canada, have they kept their own language and cultures?
Yes, some have adopted to a different way of living, but they've become augmented by the Canadian society.
Okay, fine. A culture that is based on other cultures, which are so vastly different, cannot be labeled distinct, can it?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
A culture that is based on other cultures, which are so vastly different, cannot be labeled distinct, can it?
It cannot be labeled distinct, but in Canada, the process is different. They have been augmented by the Canadian beliefs, they've been augmented by our geography, they've been augmented by the simple fact they are not in their homelands anymore.
Okay. If Canadian culture is distinct, as it is written in the question, then we are in essence saying that Canadian culture as a whole is different or diverse in comparison to other cultures. Do you agree?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
I call upon the third negative debater to render the final constructive speech, then be cross-examined by the second affirmative speaker.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I'd like to thank the Graham Bell Museum for presenting us with such a fine buffet and paraphernalia. I'd like to thank Mr. Scott Sims for setting up this fine fan here, which keeps us a little cool, standing by the podium. Canada is a country of 24 million people and is 118 years old. It has seen many new races, new nationalities of people immigrate to it. Over its 118 years, Canada has been established as one of the leading world producers of food, leading the world in the production of wheat and fish. But this country would have never risen to the level where it is without its cultural harmony. Canada's philosophy was that if you encourage those segments of the population which are neither French nor British in origin to retain and develop their rich cultural heritages, while at the same time recognizing the contribution of the French and British, the result would be a strong, unified, harmonious Canada. Great strides have been made since this time towards the realization of this goal. In October of 1971, Prime Minister Pierre Elliott Trudeau tabled in the House of Commons an official policy of the government's official policy of multiculturalism. Some of the quotes of his speech are, Pierre Trudeau said, "It was the view of the Royal Commission, shared by government, and I am sure by all Canadians, that there cannot be one cultural policy for Canadians, of British and French origin, another for the original peoples, and yet a third for all others. For although there are two official languages, there is no official culture, nor does any ethnic group take precedence over any other. No citizen or group of citizens is any other Canadian, and all should be treated fairly." Towards the end of his speech, Mr. Trudeau also remarked, "A policy of multiculturalism within a bilingual framework commends itself to the government as the most suitable means of assuring the cultural freedom of Canadians, and this vigorous policy of multiculturalism will help form the base of a society which is based on fair play for all." Today, we are feeling the effects of this important policy. For example, in Sydney, people of Scottish, French, Greek, and Polish descent can learn their native tongue. And in the mainland, there are also Hebrew, German, and French schools. These programs have been established in order to assist language communities in developing effective organizations that can participate in their language, in social, educational, and cultural aspects of Canadian society. These are just some of the projects which have received financial aid in 1984-85. It is obviously clear that we have benefited so greatly from a multicultural policy that it would be unfair, unjust, and foolish to throw full support behind any one of Canada's great cultures and heritages. Present in this room are many of our vastly different, distinctive cultures. This proves that Canada throws no support behind any one of these groups. The Scottish receive just as much financial aid as the natives, as the Acadians. I don't know if my costume is right enough, but I think it's Acadian. Wow. Yeah. Today, Canada is a working model of a truly multicultural society and is respected internationally for this. At present, approximately 78 different groups reside here. They make up nearly 30% of the population. Thank you. Stand for cross-examination.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. May I ask, what is your background? What is your origin? Where do your great-grandparents come from?
I think I'm partly Scottish, partly English, partly French.
Okay. But still, you feel as a Canadian, as all of us do in this room today, right?
I feel I am a Canadian, yes.
Okay, so you still have an individual heritage different from most other people here, or I may say quite a number of people here, and still you feel as a part of the entire Canadian culture, right?
No, I feel my heritage or culture is not different from many people in this room. I'm sure there's many other Scottish people.
There certainly
many
are,
French people, many other Greek people, whatever, in this room right now.
There certainly are, but there are certainly a large number of people of different backgrounds than you, don't you agree?
That's right.
Okay, that'll do. The Scottish kilt that a person was wearing before us, isn't it the same situation? Isn't it? The girl was wearing the Scottish kilt in front of us near, and it's as clear as my nose, you can see.
Well, he's giving her a lot of attention.
She is definitely of Scottish background, but yes, she feels as a Canadian, don't you think?
Sure.
Okay. As for the word harmony, don't you think a person can have a song, or a group can have a song with many voices at the same time, singing at the same time, perhaps on different levels of pitch, but still come out with one excellent song or purpose?
Yeah, thank you for supporting our debate.
We'll see how that. But anyway, so what I'm getting at is that a country can have many, many different voices at the same time, speaking at the same time with different interests. The voices are analogous to the different cultures or subcultures in this country. And still, we come out with one song which is being compared to the one entire culture, the whole area, the whole Canadian culture, if you may.
Of course, vive la Canada. That's right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We shall now hear a 2-minute speech by each debater. The functions of rebuttal, defense, and summary may be handled by each speaker, or they may be divided among team members. No new evidence may be introduced at this time. I call upon the first speaker for each team, beginning with the negative.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Oh, God, this is just overwhelming, okay? I don't know where to begin. We've got Bryan Adams. Yay. Britain's got the Rolling Stones. America's got Huey Lewis and the News. I mean, big deal. We've got Bryan Adams. Britain's got Margaret Thatcher. We were saying about Brian Mulrooney, those quite funny remarks. So what? That's impertinent to this resolution. And also, I'd like to say, the second speaker said about Alex Bauman, the awesome swimmer you're talking about. He just happens to be a full-blooded European. He was born in Europe, of European background. He emigrated here when he was 6 years old. And you call that Canadian culture? Good. That's great. That's just good Canadian culture, isn't it? He's got some... Now, the first speaker said that Canada was like a mosaic of many different cultures put together. That is just the utmost contradiction in one sentence you can say. Mosaic is totally different things put together. And how can so many different things be distinct? There's nothing distinguished. There's no stereotype Canadian. There's absolutely nothing distinct about Canada. It's just a combination of a whole bunch of different heritages. I mean, how can something be made up of so many different things and still be distinct? This is a total contradiction. I'd like to thank you for supporting our argument. Thank you, Madam Moderator.
Thank you, Madam Moderator, and I'd like to begin my speech by offering my seat to any member of the negative team because it seems that they have totally supported all our arguments.
call upon the second debater from each side. Again, commencing with the negative.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. You seem to think that we've agreed with you. We haven't agreed with you. My God, I stated in my speech that we're Canadians, yes, but we are other heritages, like you were saying, trying to say. We are from different backgrounds, which doesn't make us one. It doesn't make us one. It doesn't. We are from different people. We're different cultures. We're not one culture. It's not distinct. It's different cultures. How can you say that we're agreeing with you when we're saying, no, this is not right. We are different cultures, not one. The third speaker said something about the globe mail. I really didn't catch on that. Who's more important? We are more important. Our own opinions. That was only one opinion. How can you say that this is distinct Canadian culture? That was one opinion in the globe mail, not Canada's opinion. Thank you very much.
Madam Moderator, I'd like to point out that the third speaker for the negative case pointed out on the cross-examination that one could have many voices at the same time to produce a harmonic effect. This is not the situation in Canada where we have many voices, many subcultures, many nationalities, and they all speak at the same time. I'm not literally, I mean figuratively, except in some cases here. A song can be produced, a harmony of all the people in Canada can be produced by all the different voices that we have, and that is exactly what is going on here all the time. People have come to Canada, like Alex pointed out, by the same. People come to Canada, and with their different nationalities and heritages and such, and they have come to Canada and they feel as Canadians. We all here in this room feel as Canadians. We are Canadians. Distinctly different types of cultures behind us.
Debating an issue, why must we continue to redefine the terms? This isn't a spelling bee. Come on. And the first speaker also misquoted, or the first speaker was misquoted by during the cross-examination of the third speaker of the affirmative. He asked her, he mentioned, I'm not going to quote his question, but he mentioned that she said something from the Bill of Rights. She didn't say anything from the Bill of Rights. Actually, what she was saying is she was paraphrasing Mr. Trudeau's speech in 1971, where he presented a bill to be passed in the House of a multicultural policy for Canada. She said nothing about the Charter of Rights. I don't see where you found this. Maybe it was a help for your question. I don't know. And also, the second speaker seemed to, must have been a big fan of Hogan's Heroes with his Donkey Shane, you know. We know Canada's full of that, you know, German people going around, you know, Mach Schnell, Mach We don't need to hear your, and also the first speaker opening his remarks in French. Well, that was cute. That was cute. You really threw us off with that one, yeah. And the second speaker also saying that we all figuratively sing in one tone, in harmony. That's true. But we also can express our own original culture at the same time, right? I'm sure you agree with me. I'll offer my seat to any of you also. I'm sure that was a tacky move, but, you know, I'm not going to say anything about that. Commenting on the paraphernalia you brought with us. I know I love that word paraphernalia. That you brought with us, the flags and that. That's cute, the way you drag the Nova Scotia flag on the ground and that.
Have the members of either team complaints of rule violations? I got carried away with the
I always feel left out, Madam Moderator. Madam Moderator, the honorable my friend over on the negative team, the third member, has said we're dragging the flag here. Well, they've pushed it into the mud. They pushed it into the ground, my friend. How dare they call the flags of our nation's paraphernalia? Men have died in wars, more than Canadian French soldiers. They're going to stop. They're going to stop at a flag that represents so much of our lives. Then they might as well start moving to Germany.
Dr. Shane.
You march well, you'll do well. They said it's one opinion, the open letter to Brian Mulroney. Well, there are a lot of names here, and I don't have the time to read them all, but you have Ann Carver, Peter Carver, Humphrey S.M. Carver. You have people like Eugene Forsey, who represent people in our nation, who represent, because they're elected officials, people in our nation. Therefore, I think this has a lot of validity in this debate. Okay, let's follow the rules. We'll redefine and define. We'll go by the rules. We redefined them last. No one objected to that. We won the battle of the definitions. Okay, all have become, Canadian. Okay, they're saying, like, Canada's philosophy, the official policy of Canada. That must mean there's a different policy. It must differ from the United States. It must differ from other countries. It's distinctly different. That's the logical plotting after that. I'll just take this moment to thank Donna Graham for being a wonderfully patient with all the references to her. But they say that Trudeau, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, says that we have no official culture. Pierre Elliott Trudeau is one man. And I don't live and die by his words. I think for myself, and I think the majority of Canadians think that we have a diverse culture, as is being shown by the many people who are wearing different costumes today to illustrate that heritage. We are multicultural, but we are one society, one cultural. We are cultural pluralism, and that is what this country will live or stand by in the future and today. Thank you.
Now I'll ask the question. Have the members of either team specific complaints of rule violations of their opponents? I'm not to rule on these complaints, but you have a chance now for the forum.
Yes, can I make a complaint?
No.
The guy right there on the end there, the third speaker, he said that I started talking about the Bill of Rights, he misquoted me.
May I respond?
I don't have to rule on these. You just have a chance for a forum of your complaints.
May I?
Oh yes, he can respond.
If I may respond, I'll just say that she mentioned that the Bill of Rights adopted in 1961. Okay, that was the first Bill of Rights, and that was adopted by the federal parliament. But they had not the power to make that apply to all parts of Canada. And she made a reference to that, and then I made the reference to the second Bill of Rights, which was ratified by the Houses of Parliament in England, and which applied to all sectors of Canadian life, provincial and federal.
He just misquoted me again.
Anything else? On behalf of the debating organization, I thank the timekeeper for her assistance. I congratulate all debaters for their performances, and I hope that all the spectators enjoyed the event. I declare this debate officially concluded.
Good job.
The Prime Minister has 3 minutes to speak, and I'll be holding up cards that says 3, 2, 1, or, sorry, 2, 1. And then everyone else has 5 minutes to speak, and I'll hold up the cards as the minutes go by. And after the person has finished speaking, I will stand up, and that means your time is over, but you have 15 minutes grace. And when the 15 minutes or 15 seconds, long debate. After 15 seconds, I'll sit down. And that way, when I sit down, you have to sit down. Then we go back again to the Prime Minister, where she has 2 minutes to speak. And again, when her time is up, I'll stand up for 15 seconds, and I'll sit down, and she has to sit down then as well.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I take it everyone's familiar with the rules of debate. Very well. As Speaker, I will entertain points of order, personal privilege, and information. Heckling will also be permitted, although judges are to penalize any debater who interrupts another thoughtlessly or excessively, or who lowers the level of debate. I then call upon the Prime Minister to introduce the bill, define its terms, and outline the government case.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and honorable members of the House. The bill at hand this afternoon is Bill number C-10, entitled that Heritage Day be made a national holiday. We have taken Heritage Day to mean a non-political holiday to A, honor and commemorate our roots, and B, to increase and appreciate people's awareness of their own and Canada's past. We've taken national to mean Canada nationwide, and holiday, a day fixed by law where normal business is suspended in honor and celebration of a special event. We go forward on the shoulders of our ancestors. Progress is important to people, but the past is vital to our future progress. Therefore, we are magnifying its importance in our cabinet and we plan to separate the Ministry of Culture from that of Fitness and Recreation, and this ministry will work closely with the already present Canadian Heritage Foundation to administer grants, etc. for projects. This money for these grants will come not only from donations, but also from the initial fund of $100 registration fee of each society in Canada. 8% tax will be placed on all their incomes, including that of various activities and museums, etc. Provincial agreement and are in the final stage of implementing this bill. We have found the cost to be approximately $500,000. However, we have devised an excellent plan to overcome this cost. It seems that for each 1/2 an hour of American programming that television stations air, it costs $100,000. Therefore, we're going to take our CBC station and for 5 days replace 1/2 an hour of American viewing with features on Canadian heritage. Thus, we will not only save $500,000, but also make people aware by initiating the promotion which is to follow, which will be outlined by my second speaker. There is a definite need for this bill. I could start by explaining the obvious reason. We simply need a midwinter holiday. Sometimes we go up to 120 days between New Year's and Easter with an uninterrupted work session. It's no wonder that the midwinter blah has set in, especially with our harsh climate. People create their own holidays. Midwinter absenteeism is so high that Stats Canada has stopped reporting the figures. This is a loss in national product and capital which could be saved if this holiday was institutionalized. There's also the fact that a large number of our people in Canada know nothing about their heritage. They must be educated, they must be made aware of the richness of their country. We have a unique heritage in that it is made up of a mosaic of hundreds of cultures. Once people realize this, the quality of Canadian life will be enriched to its fullest potential. This will be taken care of course, with the passing of our bill. Let's not waste what our ancestors have given us. All too often we have destroyed the things that make Canada. Not only the buildings, but we have created alien environments without character and beyond human scale. We have been committing cultural suicide. Other countries have been recognizing our country's heritage in music, art, and literature more than we have. We need internal appreciation.
Thank you, honorable members. And I now call upon the first speaker for the opposition. If the opposition intends to contest the government definitions or to introduce a counter plan, it must do so during this address.
Madam Speaker, members of the House, here we are today in the House of Commons, once again debating
another possible holiday. Today, it happens to be Heritage Day. We were talking about progress in the country, and if we're so concerned with the progress in the country, why shut down the country for a day? We, the opposition, are not against Heritage Day, but we are against the idea of using Heritage Day as a holiday just for the sake of having a holiday. We also feel that it would be best way to learn about Heritage Day is in the schools, and you can't very well educate them if they're not in the schools, now can we? Now, when we were earlier today, we were talking with Heritage Canada. They told us another name for Heritage Day was Johnny MacDonald Day. Now, if we were talking about Canada as a unit, we're talking about Canada's culture, things that are passed down from generation to generation and the traditions that we have. We're talking about Canada Day. Canada Day is for the bringing together of the nation, as well as the bringing together of the people who make up this nation that we live in. Now, as far as we can see in that aspect, it is just another Canada Day with a different name. If we're talking about trying to develop each individual's heritage, then it will be very diversified, because Canada, as we all know, is a multicultural nation. It's made up of Polish, Irish, French, English, Scottish, Indians. It's made up of everything. And this will be making Canada disunified if we each study everybody's own heritage. And we already have enough trouble in that area already. We've had many troubles with the English-French relations, as well as the native peoples in Canada. We are just making an already bad situation worse. And I think it's very hard to celebrate each individual's heritage nationally. One thing I was wondering is how the government plans on legislating a national feeling of heritage for the whole country. Canada Day was sort of to, for making each person aware of their heritage, and it's not very successful. So why would Heritage Day be any more successful than the one we already have? Now, I've got this picture in my mind, the typical family, getting up in the morning, you eat your heritage breakfast, you stand beside the flag, listen to the anthem, hand over your heart with the most serene look in your face, and spend the day discussing your heritage and finding out just exactly who you are and where you come from. Now, I don't think that this is going to happen in every house around. I don't think so. Heritage is also, it's also materialistic things. It is, heritage includes, we also found this out when we were talking to Heritage Canada this morning, that it is buildings and properties that make up Canada. Now, I'm sure that the people in our country are not so artificial that just for looking for a holiday that we have to celebrate the material things. I think there are more important aspects than that.
These are not material things.
And I just don't see how the government feels like they can legislate a national feeling in something that's so diversified as everybody's different cultures, everybody's different heritages. I just don't know how the government can justify this as a reason for a holiday. Thank you.
Have you been listening?
Yes.
I thank you. I thank the honourable member. We shall now hear from the second government speaker, who must completely describe the plan for implementing the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The first negative speaker is totally off mark. First of all, by instituting a national holiday, shutting down the country for a day, thinking of all the money we're going to lose. It's quite a bit. By shutting down companies for a day, we will conserve energy. And of course, the initial loss in GNP is adequately and more accounted for in the following speeches. You mentioned something about John A. MacDonald, Jay. I believe the problem with Canada right now is that we don't realize all the heroes we have in our country, such as John A. MacDonald. And why not John A. MacDonald? Canada Day celebrates our political past. Heritage Day would celebrate our cultural past.
Here, here.
And it will increase our unity 10 times over, as you will see by my colleague. And another thing that I find sort of amusing is here, you were talking to Heritage Canada this morning, were you?
Yeah.
But that just shows how much time and thought you have put into this debate.
We thought we'd go to the bookstore.
Well, I'm sure that there are many questions in the mind of the Honourable Opposition at this moment. Foremost is, of course, would Heritage Day be economically feasible? And Madam Speaker, not only would it be economically feasible, the initial costs have already been accounted for by the Honourable Prime Minister, but by dismissing this issue, we would be denying Canadians social and economic benefits of immense proportions. We have thought about how we would increase our cultural awareness in connection with Heritage Day. We have found that the most efficient, effective way would be to work through the media, through merchants, and through the educational system. Merchants would be encouraged to set up special displays and to support our heritage industries by selling Heritage Day t-shirts, hats, balloons, and other paraphernalia. And through the media could work to our advantage through special notices in papers, a calendar of events, interviews, talk shows, special documentaries. The educational system, since Heritage Day does fall within the school term, it's only logical that we want to get our youth involved by sponsoring poster contests, writing contests, debates such as this one here today, which all increase our awareness of our heritage. But aside from the initial spark of awareness in our culture, the real thing, the real spin-off would be the tourism industry. And we want to make a name for ourselves, a respectable name for ourselves in tourism circles of the world. When you think of Great Britain, you see ancient castles and the Queen, picture France and the Eiffel Tower springs to mind. Mention Canada and immediately Buffalo Jump, Alberta springs to mind. But head smashed in Buffalo Jump, Alberta, how many people realize that that is an internationally recognized heritage site along with the Great Pyramids of Egypt? The cultural arts industry in Canada employs 235,000 people, more than any manufacturing industry. If this is the situation now with very little awareness, and the arts represent 4% of our GNP, and if this is the situation right now with a little more awareness, think of what could happen. The Stratford Festival in Ontario receives under $1.5 million in grants, yet its total budget last year was $13 million, $8 million of which was returned by box office sales. But the amount injected into the local economy was $35 million. 23 times the amount received in grants. Alex Colville, an artist in Wolfville, does about 3 paintings a year, each of which retail for over $100,000 and sell especially well in Germany. And yet he didn't need tax exemptions, common uses, cut-rate electricity, pollution controls, or special labor laws, such as industrialists regularly use in the economy. And yet he injects into the Wolfville economy approximately $1 million each year. One can say honestly that The Bay Boys by Don Petrie was the best thing to happen to Glace Bay's economy within the last few years. In 1983, the Port Authority in New York did a study and found that the arts in that local area of New York injected $5.6 billion into that. In Alberta, $20 million a year comes just from art galleries. Yes, our 11th largest industry in Canada, bigger than textiles, rubber, and plastic. We owe it to our talented population the chance to use their talents for meaningful employment.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I now call upon the
second speaker for the opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I must admit I'm rather confused about the government's arguments, what all these statistics about artists and art have to do with the argument here today, which is whether or not Heritage Day be made a national holiday. I know
Just
you
tell us how much you make now.
Madam Speaker, can I ask for some more? I believe the Prime Minister mentioned something about people having the midwinter blast. Well, it's too bad the government has the midwinter blast, but that doesn't mean everybody else does. I think there's a lot of people in this country that would rather have wages for that day than sit around watching a football game or something at home.
The wages are still present.
The government also was talking about educating people. We want to educate them to what heritage is all about. I think, and the opposition thinks, a much better way to educate the young people of the country as to what heritage is about is to keep them in school instead of letting them just run loose for the day by calling it a holiday.
You learn by doing.
Also, the government is trying to, in their speech, trying to separate politics from culture. Well, I think politics is also an aspect of culture. Yes, certainly John A. MacDonald was a hero of our country. He was also a political figure. I don't think you can separate the two. Culture is made up of many aspects.
You have limited abilities.
What we're talking about here, we are not against heritage by any means. But we're talking Valentine's Day is a highly recognized day that everyone knows Valentine's Day is about. We're going to make Valentine's Day and make it a national holiday, a day to celebrate love. Then maybe the divorce rate would go down. I don't know. The rationale here may sound a bit bizarre. We think the whole government's rationale is bizarre. The point we're really coming to here today is that the government wants a holiday. Well, the government wants to take a regular working day and make it into a holiday. One that I might add would probably not be very highly recognized.
Okay.
They talked about how, at least if it isn't a holiday, if we, right here today, we're here today, we're debating the issue. If this was a holiday, we wouldn't be here debating the issue.
We'd be celebrating our holiday.
Celebrating, I'm sure.
Why wouldn't we be here?
All having our heritage dinners. Now, at least when we are in school, we have a chance to learn exactly what heritage and culture and tradition mean to the people of the country.
I'll be in school throughout the week anyway.
Now, does the government really think that setting aside one day to make it a long weekend, a holiday, is going to automatically educate 24, 25 million people in this country as to what they are all about?
Nothing about automatically.
I think we've been here before, ladies and gentlemen. The Prime Minister has been here before. What is the government's preoccupation with having a holiday?
We've given you reasons for that.
They don't make sense.
To you, maybe.
Now, this holiday is only going to, we're talking about the GNP and increasing the economy. The only thing a day off is going to do is reduce productivity and reduce the GNP. If you want a holiday for the sake of a holiday, why don't you just say so? Then we'll debate that issue. Flag Day, Lester B. Pearson Day. They were all debated before in the same house, right where we all are. Flag Day, Heritage Day. My colleague is having a birthday this month. Maybe we should declare it a national holiday.
Trivial.
A rose by any other trivial, yes, your arguments are trivial. A holiday by any other name? A holiday is a holiday. I wish the government would try to show us that they can justify this holiday.
We're going.
Thank you.
I thank the Honourable Ms. McCrae, and I now call upon the third government speaker to deliver the final constructive speech in support of the bill.
Madam Speaker and members of the House, I trust that you have listened carefully to my colleagues' speeches.
I think I've listened too
although
carefully.
the opposition may not have. and you are now convinced of the need for a holiday. I would like to reinforce that argument with some benefits that would result from the passing of this bill. Firstly, educational benefits. Surely all of you who have ever studied history, and there are many, can relate to the feeling that at times, when you were reading those history books, it got a bit dull or boring. It was something you could never really know or understand because it was too distant. It was in a world that you had never experienced. Thus, it didn't have great meaning. Time after time, teachers have searched for something that would make these sometimes dull and tedious historical facts come to life and be more tangible and concrete for the student to grasp. Heritage Day holiday would be the perfect solution then. Because Heritage Day will be recognized as a holiday, many more people will become aware of the endless resources available to them. Teachers can profit greatly by having speakers, special assemblies, showing films and slides, or maybe touring a beautiful museum such as this one. They will become aware of the resources available to them because of the holiday that they were not aware of before. The same can be said for geography. Students and teachers alike will have the chance to learn more about the people and the places of Canada that they've never seen before. And you cannot say that this is not important. Education makes the difference between racial unity and racial prejudices. It is the key to progress. Education prevents man from repeating mistakes that he has already made. And, Madam Speaker, I think that it would be a grave mistake to ignore the opportunity to take full advantage of Heritage Day by proclaiming it a national holiday. Another definite advantage resulting from the greater awareness of our heritage is the preservation of the natural qualities of our environment. With today's technology progressing at the rapid rate that it is, there's a danger of eradicating much of our valuable past. With the abundance of computers and dehumanizing machinery, there is a tendency to become lost in a cold world of steel and concrete and machinery. I'm not saying that technology has no value, certainly not. It has great value and we should take advantage of it, but not to the exclusion of our natural environment. We can become alienated in a synthetic world. There is a basic human desire to return to the earth, to our roots, and to regain a contact with simplicity. Heritage Day holiday will thus be the perfect excuse for some people to get away to perhaps one of our many beautiful national parks across the country.
It's an excuse.
To enjoy the scenery, to take in the beauty, maybe just to breathe in the fresh air. Very healthy, I must remember. It will be an opportunity for some to find their families, and this is very important, to find out who they really are. People enjoy that. To gain a sense of belonging. It will be an opportunity to fulfill the craving for contact with the pure and the unaffected, the unchanged by man, the unpolluted. We cannot overlook the need for a holiday. A third advantage will be the national unity resulting from a deeper awareness of our heritage. We are a great country. We are rich in natural resources. Our peoples are as varied as the languages they speak. Mr. Charles Gordon, a columnist for the Ottawa Citizen and also from Maclean's magazine, says, and I quote, "Heritage is a nice word like mom or apple pie, but there is nothing Canadian about it. There is no celebration of any of the things that make us unique," unquote. We need to celebrate it to become more aware, to make people sit up and take notice. In the book of Exodus, in the Bible, chapter 12, verses 14 to 20, the Lord tells the Israelites that they must celebrate their unity with a national holiday, and they must keep it sacred. We need to celebrate together as a nation. The one essential thing that the people in Canada have in common is their differences, as shown by the last debate. I think if we have a Heritage Day a holiday commemorating Heritage Day, we will be better able to understand these differences and use them to our advantage. This not only helps us socially, but economically as well. There's your money coming right back into the economy. A country that is united is stable, and a country that is stable is attractive and inviting to investors. There's another profitable gain from a holiday. Like a chain with each culture and separate links, the bonds between these cultures will be strengthened, thus enabling Canadians to work with the strength of the tempered chain. I am proud to be Canadian. Je suis fière d'être Canadienne. Merci.
Thank you. The Leader of the Opposition will now deliver the last speech opposing the bill. It is her responsibility to complete the attack on the government case and to defend and summarize the position of the opposition. No more than 2 minutes of this speech, I beg your pardon, no more than 3 minutes of this speech may be used for introducing new evidence or constructive arguments. Unless the Leader of the Opposition indicates at the outset that she is beginning this address with the official rebuttal, the last 2 minutes of the speech will constitute the official rebuttal and must contain no new evidence.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, members of the government, members of the House. I would like to ask the government today what exactly is the purpose or the rationale behind having Heritage Day the third Monday of every February.
Are you deaf?
Why not a specific date? Why not the third Tuesday, or why not the 5th? It's obvious, as the government has said, to have a long weekend. But if the government was a little bit more aware, they should know by now that it is on long weekends that we have a greater number of drinking and driving, that there's a greater number of accidents. Is this what our government is promoting? Is this the type of irresponsible government we have?
Certainly not.
Well, it seems that way. Now, direct from Ottawa, from Heritage Canada, which is a government agency, we found that they said, quote, that the purpose of Heritage Day is to have a good time, a day off, to take a break, unquote. And why? Because February is a blah month. So do we have a government here who is promoting a good time in a dull month? Is that what they're promoting? A long weekend? So more people can get out and become drunk, go out and party, more accidents can occur, and more accidents can occur. Personal knowledge is what I'm speaking. For the last 6 years, Heritage Day has been in existence. How come during those 6 years the government did nothing to promote its awareness? Do they actually believe that by having a national holiday they can promote its awareness?
Yep.
And so imagine the loss of productivity. But if they wanted to shut off Canada for one full day, the last 6 years the government could not justify the expense. They could not justify the loss of GNP. And now they are attempting to, and they have not satisfied us.
Your government was.
And the government seems to say, well, the money will come back. We will be able to pay for it by having heritage shows on Canada television. Well, I am quite sure that most Canadians would rather watch American soap operas than watch Canadian heritage. And that is just a fact. Whether it's good or bad, it's a fact.
Show me your facts.
Well, any person who has knowledge and any person who knows Canadians would know that. And
we know Canadians.
The second speaker of the government has said something to the effect of conserving energy. We conserve energy by having a day off. Well, if people get in their cars and they drive to Halifax or wherever for a vacation, is that conserving energy? I don't really believe that too much energy will be conserved by having a day off. And will Canadians really take advantage of these cultural benefits? How many people walk into a mall and look at these cultural displays? Not too many people. Even in the past 6 years, people have not become aware of what Canada Day is. Very few people actually know in our country today what Canada Day is, what it is celebrated for, and when it is. Does the government actually think that they can promote its awareness and that more people are going to know about it by having a national holiday? People will know, well, we have a national holiday on the third Monday of every February. But will they know exactly what Heritage Day is? Well, it has something to do with heritage, but they will not know anything else. It has taken 6 years now. Do we wait another 12 years until people actually know what Heritage Day is?
We're not waiting. We're getting ready to buy.
People would prefer to go on vacations, to spend their time leisurely, sit at home. I mean, how do you promote awareness like that? And you do not actually need a national holiday to promote or to accomplish all things that the government is setting out. That can be done any day in which people can come together and celebrate the unification of Canada. That is done on Canada Day. We do not need another Heritage Day.
We don't have
And the government seems to be more concerned about their own popularity by having a national holiday. They do not seem to be concerned about our economy. They don't seem to be concerned about the people. There are not too many benefits which can be reaped by having a long weekend, which seems to be the purpose, actual purpose, of having Heritage Day. How can you possibly justify this? How can the government possibly justify this?
We've already justified it.
I don't think so. And the government thinks that people will, quote, sit up and take notice of Heritage Day. Well, I doubt that very many people will sit up and take notice of Heritage Day just because it is a national holiday.
Okay.
I mean, then why not make another day? Why not make Groundhog Day a national holiday? That is about the extent of the government's arguments. People can go out and watch the groundhogs coming out of the hole, so they will know exactly when their winter is going to end. Ladies and gentlemen, Heritage Day has been in existence for 6 years, and people still don't know what it is about. If people do not feel strongly for it, if people do not take an interest in it, and if people do not know very much about it, there is no justification in making it into a national holiday.
Thank you very much. I call now upon the Prime Minister to present the government official rebuttal. During this 2-minute speech, no new evidence may be introduced.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To begin with, when you mentioned the groundhogs, I can see that the opposition is fooling around. We are not being silly. We are being serious. We are serious about our holiday. The long weekend is not going to just give us a break. It is going to boost our economy. If you have been listening, we've given you endless statistics of how it is going to boost our economy. In tourism alone, tourists bring over $600 million into our economy each year.
People are going to come.
Each year. We are not, you say you are not against heritage. You also say that that people don't know that Heritage Day exists. That is precisely our point. That is why we need this holiday. Heritage will not come of age, nor be taken seriously until it is given an official stamp of approval. This, my loyal opposition, is our official stamp of approval. We also say that you do not, you speak with generalities. You speak with generalities. We have given you facts. When you say about drinking and driving, you just speak. How do we know that you actually know that? You've given us generalities. We are using facts. Maybe this is indicative of the reason that we are on the government side and you are on the opposition. We also say that with the economy, I could go on and on forever about the economy. Not only tourist industries, but our merchants are going to make money. You know that if merchants are making money on simple paraphernalia, that this is going to bring money to our government. Okay? Taxes. You're aware of the taxes that we have on stuff like that. Okay, you're saying that people are not aware of each other's heritage, and if they become aware, we will have more mass confusion. But, my loyal opposition, ignorance is confusion. Once we know and understand each other's heritage, then there will be harmony. Oh, you say that we will not get wages, people will not get paid for their day of their holiday, but people, I'm sure, do get paid for Easter, they do get paid for Christmas holidays, okay? This money will be made up of the off-spend.
Point of order.
Thank you.
Quite right. I needn't rule on that point since your time is clearly up and the debate is now concluded. On behalf of the host, I thank the clerk for her assistance. I congratulate all debaters on their performances. And I thank the members of the gallery for their attentiveness. I have one question for Mr. McNeil. How would you like the judging to be handled?
Like I said, it's going to be, I would like to have the individuals involved just go to the corner of the room or whatever and have one of them be spokesman and just let us know whether or not they...
All right. This debate is now concluded. There is no other business on the order paper. The host stands adjourned.